Chapter 16:16. Night Devil's Blade, War Blade, Epic Attack. 400-400 mana. 200-200 plus 50 strength plus 50 physique. Shadow of the Night Demon. Passive skill. Increases attack speed by 30%. Has a certain chance to summon the Shadow of the Night Demon to assist in attacking the target, dealing double damage. Night Demon's Downfall. Passive skill. Every time the target is attacked, a Night Demon's downfall will stack. Each Night Demon's downfall increases attack power by 1%. Maximum increase is 50%. Night Demon's Fog. Passive skill. Releases a dark fog during battle, causing the target to be blinded. Night Devil's Hand. Active skill. Summons the Night Devil's Hand to assist in battle. When activated, Night Devil's Hand's attack range is increased by 50%. Consumes 1% MP per second. Night Demon's Descent. Active skill. Consumes 50% MP to summon a Night Demon avatar to assist in battle. Lasts for 120 seconds. Cooldown, 3,600 seconds. Level requirement, 50. Profession requirement. General item introduction. At the beginning of the War of Gods and Demons, Night Demon Raphael was beheaded by God Carrot. His soul was sealed in this blade and left in the hero's continent. Due to its violent nature, it has not found an owner for thousands of years. Epic skill. Night Demon's Slash. Passive skill. Has a certain chance of killing the target or breaking the opponent's weapon. Oh, looking at the Night Demon blade in Lao Wang's hand, everyone could not help but touch their chins. To be honest, even though the Night Demon's blade was an epic equipment, there was nothing special about it. The 5 skills were average, neither strong nor weak. It was completely in line with the attributes of a piece of equipment of this tier. The only thing worth mentioning was the Night Demon's Slash skill at the end. Whether it was at the current stage or the later stages of the game, it was a terrifying attribute, especially when it came to breaking the opponent's weapon. After all, equipment was the most important thing to players in the game, and weapons were the lifeblood of players. However, this attribute came with probability, and its actual combat ability was not that great. However, the additional attributes of the equipment were related to the blueprint, because the attributes of epic equipment were fixed. The main attributes of the equipment were directly related to the Night Demon Blade's attack, magic, strength, and constitution. Obviously, as a Grandmaster blacksmith, Chopper 345 was very qualified. Ordinary blacksmiths would be able to forge a weapon with full attribute. However, under Chopper 345's forging, the Night Demon Blade's 4 main attributes were all full attribute. Could be called the best of the best. Of course, Lao Wang and Wang Yu were both martial artists. They did not have high requirements for the attributes of their weapons. To people like them, the most important thing was whether the equipment was suitable or not. In the past, when Wang Yu sent a message to Evildoers Run Wild, no matter how busy Evildoers Run Wild was, as long as he was online, he would definitely reply within 10 seconds. However, a long time had passed, and there was still no movement from Evildoers Run Wild. It was really strange. Thinking of this, Wang Yu took a look at Evildoers Run Wild's status again. There was no problem, he was not offline, and he was not busy. But why was there no reply? "Are you okay?" Wang Yu sent another message. At this time, Evildoers Run Wild finally replied. The reply was very simple, only 2 words: "Help!" Seeing this message, Wang Yu was immediately stunned. Wang Yu knew very well how strong Evildoers Run Wild was. Although this kid's talent in martial arts was not as high as Wang Yu's, and he was not as hard-working as Wang Yu, he had a good foundation and strength. In addition, this kid was the richest person in Rebirth, and his equipment was incomparably powerful. In this game, other than Wang Yu could not think of anyone else who could make Evildoers Run Wild cry for help. "What's wrong?" Wuji saw Wang Yu's expression and could not help but ask. Wang Yu said with some uncertainty, Evildoer, he just asked me for help, what? Hearing Wang Yu's words, Wuji's expression immediately became serious. He touched his chin and said seriously, "Damn, what I was most worried about really happened." Chapter 16-17. Evildoers Run Wild was a merchant, but he wasn't a low-profile person. Back when the Pro League had just ended, Evildoers Run Wild had quickly signed a ragtag team. Wuji had already predicted this day. The tallest tree in the forest would be destroyed by the wind. In real life, if a person was too high profile, people would be jealous, let alone in a world where there were no morals. To move unhindered was just a new guild. The guild was something that needed time to build up. Like Blood Alliance, an old guild that had been around for many years, had a deep foundation and vast connections. They had to develop step by step and didn't dare to stand out too much. They were afraid of being seen as the first bird to stand out. Yet, Unhindered had risen to prominence at such a rapid pace. In less than a year, it had developed into a gigantic guild with over 1 million members. Just how frightening was this development? Back in the day, a single spark could start a prairie fire, but it didn't have such momentum. There was strength in numbers, but that was built on the foundation of everyone being united. Even the world's top guild, Three Fiend Village, at its peak, only had a few 100,000 players. Take a guild like Unhindered for example. Even though the guild had over 1 million members in less than a year, the vast majority of players hadn't even seen what the Evildoer Rampage looked like, let alone a so-called corporate culture. A guild like that probably didn't even have the most basic sense of cohesiveness, let alone a united front. When the team was big, the hearts of the players would scatter. When the forest was big, what could there be? Even if Evildoers Run Wild paid them a monthly salary, would they be able to win the hearts of the players? Impossible. There were many rare ores of unknown origin on the market. It could be seen that people were greedy creatures. There were many players who would secretly steal from the guild and sell the good ores for themselves. Although this guild was called a guild, it was at most a mine for resources and wealth. Apart from the group of trusted followers who were monsters at the very beginning, the majority of the players in the guild were people who believed that as long as there was milk, they would be a mother. Without a solid foundation, the earth would shake. Evildoers Run Wild was a classic example of someone who took too big a step and pulled his balls. With a guild without any cohesion, wouldn't it collapse just like that? If Evildoers Run Wild kept a low profile, the other guilds wouldn't take the initiative to provoke such a paper tiger. However, Evildoers Run Wild was a high-profile player. It was only natural that others would target him. What was the situation with the major guilds in the game? Normally, everyone was happy and called each other brothers, but once something happened to someone, those guilds who usually called each other brothers couldn't wait to step on them. With Evildoers Run Wild's temper, he had definitely offended many people on a daily basis. To move unhindered, if something were to happen to him, the mastermind wouldn't even need to take action. The major guilds of the various major cities would rush forward and divide him among themselves. It had to be known that Evildoers Run Wild's business was quite big, but its business model was so simple and crude that it made people's hair stand on end. To put it bluntly, if you joined his guild and signed a contract that you wouldn't leave the guild, everyone would be able to develop the mines together. The more mines they handed over, the more money they would receive. Such a simple contract had no commercial nature at all. At most, it was a large workshop with Evildoers Run Wild as the workshop owner. Other than having the rights to develop the mines, Evildoers Run Wild as the workshop owner had no way of controlling his employees. This kind of business model was naturally full of loopholes. Hiring long-term workers, this was what landlords did before liberation. How many years had it been behind the times? Evildoers Run Wild actually knew that its business model wasn't working. But it couldn't be helped. Everyone was here to play the game, not to sell their bodies. If the terms were too harsh, naturally there wouldn't be many players joining their guild. If there wasn't anyone in the guild, in Rebirth, there were at least 100 guilds with more than 10,000 players in the 300 main cities. Without enough people, evildoers run wild's minds wouldn't be as safe. This kind of business model was something that he had no choice but to do. Because of this, not only did evildoers run wild's boss not have the means to control his employees, but in a sense, he was being controlled by his own employees. It wasn't easy for a guild like this to last until now. Of course, Wuji also knew that this was definitely caused by Wang Yu forcefully demanding materials, but this was just a fuse. To move unhindered after all, such a big bubble, even if Wang Yu didn't burst it, when it swelled to its limit, it would burst on its own. To move unhindered then would definitely be like the Three Fiends village in the past, with many small groups with their own forces. It would definitely be more difficult to deal with then. To move unhindered now, however, it hadn't even been a year since it was established, and most of the forces in the guild hadn't matured yet. Being exposed by Wang Yu now might not be a bad thing. "Where's old demon now?" Wuji asked with a frown. "I don't know." Wang Yu shook his head. "He only said, 'Help me,' and didn't send me his coordinates. He's definitely surrounded by people now." "It's okay." Wuji muttered to himself and turned to Spring, who wasn't far away. "Brother Spring, use all-seeing eyes and check evildoers run wild's coordinate." All-seeing eyes was a common spell that could be learned from wizard mentors. It cost gold coins to accurately check the coordinates of specific players. It was a necessary skill for killing and robbing people. The disadvantage was that not only did it cost money to learn the skill, but it also cost a lot of gold coins for each level up. Everyone in Chuanjin did bad things together, and learning it was a waste of money. Thus, only Spring had maxed out this skill. "What's wrong?" Spring seemed to have sensed something when he heard this. He said cautiously, "Can't we just ask him? Why do we need to spend money to look at his coordinates? Old demon is being chased now. He doesn't have the time to send us his coordinates," Wuji said calmly. "He's being chased?" Although Wuji's voice wasn't loud, it reached everyone's ears. When they heard Wuji's words, everyone in Chuanjin was shocked. They retracted their attention from old Wang and said in shock, "Old demon has millions of underlings. Who dares to chase after him? Does he want to die?" "Humph." Wuji snorted coldly. "So what if he has millions of underlings? Perhaps his millions of underlings are chasing after him? Who? So tragic? He's being chased by his own underlings?" At that moment, Lao Wang couldn't feel everyone's gazes. He tactfully put away his sword and walked over. As he walked, he took pleasure in Wang Zhong's misfortune and said, "He can't even control his own underlings. This grandson is really noob. What's the name of this idiot? If I have the time, I'll go and mock him." This old fellow loved to watch others make a fool of themselves. He really had no manners. Everyone was speechless when they heard this. Wuji cautiously said, "This idiot is called Evildoers Run Wild. Demon. Damn." Chapter 16-18. Then where is he now? Putting aside Lao Wang's character, he was still very concerned about his son. When he heard that Evildoers Run Wild was blocked, he hurriedly asked, Hey, Wang Yu's face was full of black lines. "I've been blocked so many times, but I've never seen you help me. How can you be so biased?" "Nonsense," Lao Wang said. "What abilities do you have? What abilities does your younger brother have? Can he be like him? Furthermore, you have such a group of friends with unique skills. If you guys can't solve the problem, what can I do?" "Master Wang, you're right. Old cow, shut up." As soon as Lao Wang said this, Chuanjin's group was instantly elated. After all, being praised as an expert by a fierce person like Lao Wang was still very useful. As expected, the older the ginger, the spicier it was. This Lao Wang was indeed an experienced person. Not only did his words fool the Chuanjin dogs, but even Wang Yu was stunned and secretly delighted. It couldn't be helped. Who didn't like to be flattered? Wang Yu's lifelong wish was to surpass his father. Now that his father's meaning was obvious, Wang Yu naturally felt quite comfortable. At this time, Chun Xiang finally found Evildoers Run Wild's coordinates and hurriedly said, "I found it. Old Devil is now in Sinful City." Damn! Knowing that the evildoer Rampage had run into the city of sin, Wuji's face immediately turned black. He sucked in a breath of cold air and said, "Damn, this group of bastards wants to kill this old demon." "What do you mean?" Seeing Wuji's expression, Wang Yu asked in confusion. Wuji said confidently, "It's obvious that they are trying to lure the old demon into killing them, and then kill him." This, after hearing Wuji's explanation, Wang Yu also reacted. What kind of place was Sin City? In the City of Sin, no one cared if you killed or robbed someone. The guards in the City of Sin were just decorations. As long as you didn't harm the NPCs, the guards wouldn't care how many people you killed or how many PK points you gained. It was common knowledge that players had 5 PK points. If they encountered the guards within the city, they would have to stay far away from them. If they had 10 PK points, the guards would hunt them down within the city. However, in Rebirth, not only were monsters' drop rates low, but players' drop rates were also low. Even a red name with 10 PK points would not drop too many items in one go. But if the PK points were stacked without a limit, once a player died, they would drop so much that not even their underwear would remain. Obviously, this group of guys chasing Evildoers Run Wild knew the strength of Evildoers Run Wild very well. Otherwise, they wouldn't have come up with such a vicious idea to give Evildoers Run Wild a quick death. They were afraid that a long delay would bring trouble. Then what are we waiting for? Let's go. Lao Wang naturally understood what kind of situation Evildoers Run Wild was in. Upon hearing this, he anxiously wanted to use the teleportation portal to send Yu Huiqing flying. "Uncle Wang." Upon seeing this, Wuji hurriedly shouted, "Take the airship. By the time we get there, the old monster's corpse will be cold." As he spoke, Wuji took out 3 scrolls and distributed them to everyone. Luckily, I received a few more scrolls when I did the level 60 skill mission last time. Everyone took the scrolls and looked at them. Teleportation scroll. Coordinates Sin City. The few people who received the scrolls hurriedly tore the scrolls open, and 3 blue teleportation portals appeared in front of everyone. Each teleportation scroll could teleport up to 4 people. Chuanjin had 11 people, and Lao Wang had a total of 12 people, which was just right. Everyone immediately stepped into the teleportation portal. The scene changed, and they arrived at Sin City. Wow! As soon as they walked out of the teleportation portal, everyone was stunned. Damn it! Sin City was a desolate place, and the people there were extremely vile. Most people would not stay here. After Wang Yu had triggered a monster massacre in the city, the main city level of the city of Sin had dropped to the level of a town. The area of the main city had instantly shrunk, and the originally small number of players had been forced to leave their homes. The city was practically empty. But now Sin City, which was not big to begin with, was now filled with players everywhere. They were so densely packed that there was almost no place to stand. It was a black mass as far as the eye could see. F***CK. Seeing so many people, Chuanjin and the others were speechless. They were here to save people, but there were as many people as there were maggots in a cesspool. It was difficult to choose the maggot they wanted to find among so many maggot. Furthermore, this description was disgusting. If they could not even find the person they wanted to help, how could they do it? Of course, Chuanjin had always asked Wuji for help when they could not make a decision, and looked for Wang Yu to intimidate them with force. In such a situation, everyone's gaze fell on Wuji and said, "Wuji old dog, what should we do?" Wuji stretched out his index finger and shook it. Then, he pulled a player beside him and asked, "Brother, where is that bastard Evildoers Run Wild?" The player was stunned by Wuji's question. He looked at Wuji and asked in confusion, "You guys just arrived?" "Yes, we just arrived. It seems like we're late." Wuji nodded. "Not late yet. That evildoer is not dead yet." The player pointed at the wizard tower in the distance and said, "He's on the tower. I don't think we'll be able to squeeze in anytime soon. But that's better. At least we're not traitors." It seemed like this player was quite good at comforting himself. He had already surrounded evildoers run wild like a dog, and he still said that he was not a traitor. Could it be that he had to go up and stab evildoers run wild to death? "In order to thank you, I've decided to teach you a way to not be a traitor and still get some benefits," Wuji said with a smile. "Oh? What is it?" The player was surprised. "Hee." Wuji laughed. Mingjian Daoxue, who was behind the player, took out a dagger and stabbed the player in the back. Pooh! There was a flash of white light, and the player was sent back to the resurrection point. Before he died, the player seemed to hear Wuji say, "You're welcome." "He's at the wizard tower. How do we get there?" Looking at the vast number of players, Wang Yu frowned. There were at least tens of thousands of players in the city of sinners. It was impossible to kill them one by one. After all, players could resurrect after they died. Moreover, killing people would cause too much of a commotion. If they were not careful, even Xuanzhen's group would be killed. Flying over was actually a good idea, but it was useless. With so many players, what was the use of flying to the innermost area? Wouldn't they still be surrounded together with evildoers run wild? There were tens of thousands of evil players. Even if Xuanzhen was full of Wang Yu, it would be impossible to break through them head-on. "It's nothing." Hearing Wang Yu's question, Wuji was slightly amused. Then, he said to Wang Yu, later, "We'll scatter these people. You and Uncle Wang will go in and save them." "Scatter? You guys?" Wang Yu was in disbelief. How strong were Xuanzhen's people? Wang Yu knew very well that a mere 10 people wanted to scatter tens of thousands of players. Was he dreaming? Of course it's not us. Everyone, fly up and copy me." The players who had been slaughtered by the guards were not resurrected at the resurrection point in the City of Sin. Instead, they were forcefully transported to the temporary resurrection point in the leveling area. Seeing how terrifying the guards were, the remaining players naturally did not dare to stay on the street. They all fled in all directions. In just 3 to 5 minutes, the originally crowded street suddenly became abnormally deserted. Wuji had always been ruthless. After clearing the path in front of Wang Yu, he did not stop there. His group of people led the guards to the other streets and slaughtered a few more people before spreading their wings and leaving. To move unhindered, the players who were lucky enough to survive looked at the figures of Wuji's group as they left. They could not help but tremble. It was likely that they would not dare to stroll on the streets for a while. What a joke! With this group of sweeping NPCs around, who would dare to walk the streets? Wouldn't that be courting death? "Alright, you guys go and save them. We're going to escape." After receiving Wuji's message, Wang Yu smiled at Lao Wang and said, "Let's go. It's our turn." Damn it! At that moment, Lao Wang was completely stunned by the scene just now. He only came back to his senses after being reminded by Wang Yu. He said with lingering fear, "Your friend is quite interesting." "He's alright. That's the only good thing about him." Wang Yu laughed. "Good thing?" Lao Wang was dumbfounded. The wizard tower in the City of Sin was located in the center of the city. Wang Yu and his son were at the resurrection point, which was only a few hundred meters away from the wizard tower. Just now, the players had blocked the way and it was difficult to advance. Now that the players blocking the way had been cleared by the guards led by Wuji and the others, it was naturally a flat plain. Soon, Wang Yu and his son arrived at the wizard tower without much effort. Chapter 1620. Wuji's actions just now had cleared the entire street of people. The outside of the wizard's tower was no exception. It was originally tightly surrounded, but now there was not a single person. Walking to the bottom of the tower, Wang Yu stretched out his hand and pushed open the door. Whoosh! At this moment, Wang Yu heard the sound of something breaking through the air. Everyone in the game knew how to send messages from thousands of miles away. Although the tower's door was tightly shut, the people inside the tower could still hear the commotion outside. Naturally, they were on guard against Wang Yu, who was outside. The moment Wang Yu pushed open the door, a thick and long arrow flew towards Wang Yu. F***CK. In the blink of an eye, Wang Yu immediately turned his body and stretched out his hand to grab the arrow. Wang Yu's skill at grabbing arrows had already reached the point of perfection. Not to mention one arrow, even if there were 10 arrows, Wang Yu could easily grab them. However, what Wang Yu did not expect was that when his hand grabbed the arrow, a strange force suddenly came from the arrow. Whoosh! 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 Caught off guard, Wang Yu was pushed 3 to 4 steps to the side by the huge force of the arrow. His face immediately revealed a shocked expression. Grim Reaper's left hand? There were tens of millions of archers in Rebirth, but Wang Yu had only seen one person with such domineering arrow strength, and that was the full-strength archer, Grim Reaper's left hand. That's not right. Grim Reaper's left hand is a fairly upright person, and he is very close to Chuanjin's people. He is also an expert under Blood Alliance, and he can be considered an old acquaintance of evildoers run wild. At this time, there is no reason for him to join in the attack on evildoers run wild. Could it be that other than Grim Reaper's left hand, there is also a strength-based archer? On this point, Wang Yu's guess was not wrong. There were all kinds of birds in a big forest. With hundreds of millions of players in Rebirth, it was reasonable to have 1 or 2 non-mainstream players. The archer in the tower was called World Domination. To move unhindered, he was one of the core experts. Although he was not the Grim Reaper's left hand, he was a full-strength archer just like the Grim Reaper's left hand. However, at this moment, Stand Rule the World's expression was even more exaggerated than Wang Yu's. Seeing that Wang Yu had not only dodged his arrow, but had even caught it in his hand, Stand Rule the World was dumbfounded, and his jaw dropped to the ground. To move unhindered was the largest guild in the game. The players in the guild were all rich and powerful. To move unhindered was one of the core experts in the guild. Naturally, his strength was extraordinary. To move unhindered was a business guild, and World Domination was a very low-profile person. Others might not know how strong this guy was, but World Domination was very clear about it. Especially the arrow that World Domination had shot just now. Not only had he used a specially made arrow, he had also used a knockback skill. At such a close distance, even a fierce person like evildoers run wild would have to dodge. However, this guy in front of him, who looked exactly like evildoers run wild, had actually extended his hand and caught it. F***CK. Don't look at how World Domination and the others were traitors. They had absolute approval of evildoers run wild strength. Otherwise, they wouldn't have made such a big move to surround evildoers run wild. Evildoers run wild was already so strong. This person in front of him was clearly stronger than evildoers run wild. What kind of monster was this? Could it be? Thinking about this, World Domination asked in fear, "Is that Guru Iron Ox outside the door?" Although World Domination wasn't one of the confidants who had mixed with evildoers run wild from the start, he was still an expert who had relied on his strength to become a core player of a large guild. To move unhindered was naturally an expert like evildoers run wild. The only person who had defeated evildoers run wild was the legendary Guru Iron Ox. It was said that the two of them had a close relationship and looked exactly the same. The person outside the door was undoubtedly Wang Yu. When old Wang saw that Wang Yu had been shot by an arrow, he was rather angry. After all, Wang Yu was his masterpiece. He couldn't bear to see Wang Yu being repelled by a normal person with an arrow. When he heard someone talking inside the tower, old Wang didn't wait for Wang Yu to reply and interrupted, Stop talking nonsense. We're here to pick up evildoers run wild. If you know what's good for you, let him out. Whoosh! However, just as Old Wang finished speaking, another arrow flew out from the door and headed straight for Old Wang's face. Compared to the Wang Yu and Wang Yu, who were the number one experts and the leader of the number one guild, Old Wang was relatively low-key. Naturally, the people in the sect didn't recognize him. If this was said by Wang Yu, world domination might have hesitated. The number one expert in the world was worth world domination's hesitation. But who did this orc think he was? How dare he point at the door and make a ruckus? World domination obviously wouldn't let him off. He immediately knocked an arrow and shot at Old Wang. Back then, Old Wang was notorious in the kung fu circle. He had enemies all over the world. Such an arrogant person definitely had more battle experience than the Wang Yu and Wang Yu put together. Seeing the arrow fly towards him, Old Wang didn't dodge. Instead, he pulled out his right hand from his waist. Clang! Following a soft sound, a black blade flashed. World Domination's arrow was immediately split in half by Old Wang's blade. What did it mean to be old but vigorous? Evildoers run wild couldn't dodge left or right, and could only retreat step by step. Now, under the warlock's control, Evildoers run wild was being forced to the top of the tower by the pursuers, and it looked like he was going to die. Humph! Lao Wang was an extremely protective person, and Evildoers Run Wild was one of Lao Wang's favorite days. At that moment, when he saw Evildoers Run Wild being surrounded and beaten up, Lao Wang was instantly enraged. He couldn't help but snort coldly and scold, "Second brother, just you wait. Your brother and I will go up now. Damn, who gave these bastards the guts to do this?" At this moment, the pursuers on the second floor, who had received Lu Tianxia's notification, turned around. When they heard Lao Wang's words, everyone thought that there would be many helpers downstairs. However, when they saw Wang Yu and Wang Yu standing in front of the door, they couldn't help but be stunned. There were only two people. Were they considered helpers? What kind of joke was this? At this moment, Evildoers Run Wild also heard Lao Wang's voice. He couldn't help but feel excited. He casually threw a player downstairs and shouted, "Father Boss, you're finally here." Father? When the pursuers heard this, they couldn't help but laugh. They all said that Evildoers Run Wild was an unrivaled hero. They never thought that he would call his father out at this moment. Was he trying to take advantage of his seniority? This wasn't a fight between children. Who cared about him? You guys, take care of those two down there. The rest of you, continue. At this moment, the leading knight player pointed at Wang Yu and gave orders to the few warrior players behind him. The warriors received the order and leaped in front of Wang Yu. In the end, they were players who came from mining. They didn't care about what was happening outside of the cave and only thought about mining materials. They didn't even know who was standing in front of them and dared to step forward. Damn it. It was understandable that they didn't recognize Lao Wang, but Wang Yu was the champion of the professional league and a legendary ruthless person. How could they not recognize him? Chapter 1622. Ha ha ha! Seeing that there was really a fool who dared to stop Wang Yu and Feng Luo, the evildoer Hing Xing couldn't help but laugh at the knight. Sovereign's Descent, do you really think that a bunch of trash like you can cause any trouble? The knight raised an eyebrow. Boss, you've even brought up your own father. Don't tell me you still don't have the slightest awareness? Since we were once brothers, I will also call you Big Brother. Do you really have the heart to let the brothers who have dominated the world fight each other? As long as you hand over the guild leader's token and everyone's contract, I'll let you live. I'll even compensate you with a large sum of money. Otherwise, don't blame me for being ruthless. To move unhindered was the reason why Evildoers Run Wild was able to control such a large guild. Evildoers Run Wild had everyone's contract in his hands. As long as the contract and token were still in Evildoers Run Wild's hands, These players were theoretically still employees of Evildoers Run Wild. Even if they betrayed Evildoers Run Wild, the guild's profits would still belong to Evildoers Run Wild. To move unhindered in the face of the guild's profits, these players didn't care about anything else. So even if Sovereign's Descent succeeded in usurping the guild's position, they wouldn't be able to obtain the guild's profits without the token. To move unhindered, players couldn't leave the guild. They couldn't even disband the guild and start anew. The reason why Sovereign's Descent forced Evildoers Run Wild into a dead end and gave Evildoers Run Wild so many PK points was to get the token or contract out. With the token, there would be profit. With the contract, they could rebuild the guild. The guild leader's token couldn't be stored in the guild's warehouse. So even if Evildoers Run Wild stored the contract in the guild's warehouse, Sovereign's Descent could replace it as long as they obtained the token. Haha. Upon hearing that, Evildoers Run Wild sneered and said, "Since you don't want to fight, just quit the game and never play again. Why waste your breath on me? What's the use of all this high-sounding bullshit?" After saying that, Evildoers Run Wild turned to the players behind Sovereign Descends the World and said, "You bastards, I've never mistreated you. Do you really think that you'll be able to make a living by following this kid? Or do you think you can change the world by killing me?" Hearing Evildoers Run Wild's words, the players who were attacking Evildoers Run Wild immediately slowed down their attacks. Originally, they were all Evildoers Run Wild's subordinates, so they were a little reluctant to become traitors. But now that they had followed Sovereign Descends the World to hunt Evildoers Run Wild for so long, they had also experienced how difficult it was to deal with Evildoers Run Wild. Moreover, looking at his technique and the position of his blade, he seemed to be very familiar with it. Who would dare to provoke such a terrifying person? "Let's hit the small one." The warriors looked at each other, and tactfully looked at Wang Yu. Without waiting for them to make a move, Wang Yu had already rushed in front of them. He stretched out his hands and grabbed two of the warriors' neck. Then, he pressed his hands down and used the momentum to kick out. Bang, 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 bang. Following a series of dull thuds, Wang Yu's feet landed on the chests of the other warriors at almost the same time. Warriors had thick skin and flesh. Wang Yu didn't use any weapons or skills, so he didn't kill them instantly. Instead, he kicked them back a few steps. The warriors' formation was broken, and Wang Yu easily jumped to the center of the mage tower. "I'll leave these people to you." Wang Yu waved at old Wang, activated Qinggong, and leaped into the air. Fighters had the highest jumping ability out of all the classes, and Wang Yu's Qinggong allowed him to jump 4 times. With this one jump, Wang Yu directly jumped from the ground to the 4th floor. Holy shit! The players on the stairs were shocked by Wang Yu's exaggerated jump. At this time, Sovereign Descent also saw Wang Yu's appearance with the help of the light from the top of the tower. Sovereign Descent seemed to remember something when he saw Wang Yu's appearance. His heart suddenly skipped a beat and he hurriedly shouted, "Not good! Everyone, attack that fighter who jumped up! Don't let him come up!" It was obvious that Sovereign Descends the World was no weakling. His grasp of timing was quite accurate. His opponent was in midair, and it was difficult for him to move. Under normal circumstances, a crowd control skill would not miss its target. Of course, it also depended on who the opponent was. Using this skill against Wang Yu was basically useless. Just as the shield phantom was about to smash into Wang Yu's face, Wang Yu leaped a meter to the side, and the shield phantom brushed past him. This is impossible! Sovereign Descends the World was stunned when he saw his sure-hit attack being dodged by Wang Yu. The smile on his face gradually froze. Before Sovereign Descends the World could recover from his shock, Wang Yu had already descended from the sky and sent a palm strike towards Sovereign Descends the World's face. Sovereign Descends the World was momentarily dazed. Could this be the legendary palm strike that descended from the sky? In a daze, Sovereign Descends the World subconsciously lowered his head and bent his waist. At this time, Wang Yu had already landed above Sovereign Descends the World. Seeing Sovereign Descends the World lower his head, Wang Yu bent his right hand into a claw and grabbed the hair on the back of Sovereign Descends the World's head, yanking him upwards. Sovereign Descends the World was standing at the edge of the stairs. When he lowered his head, half of his body was already outside the handrail. Being grabbed by Wang Yu like that, one could well imagine his fate. Ayayaya! Sovereign Descends the World let out a blood-curdling scream as he fell headfirst. On the other hand, Wang Yu used the force of his hand to somersault in the air and landed steadily on the stairs. As a heavy armor class, Sovereign Descends the World's weight was quite heavy. The six-story tower was at least 17 to 18 meters high, so the commotion caused was quite spectacular. Kaboom! Following the loud sound, everyone in the tower felt as if the ground was shaking. As the person in question, Sovereign Descends the World's HP bar directly dropped by half after being thrown onto the ground. Swoosh! Everyone's gaze in the tower was attracted by Sovereign Descends the World. Looking at Sovereign Descends the World's but facing the sky, everyone forced themselves to hold back their laughter until their faces turned bright red. This time, Sovereign Descends the World's face had truly fallen to the ground. He used both his hands to push himself off the ground and pulled his head out. Then, he climbed up in a sorry state and pointed at Wang Yu, cursing loudly, "F***ck your father? Have a good trip. Take care." Hearing this, Wang Yu and evildoers Run Wild cupped their fists at Sovereign Descends the World in admiration. Sovereign Descends the World was dumbfounded by the two of them. Just as Sovereign Descends the World was in a daze, a large sword stretched out from behind Sovereign Descends the World. The light of the sword flashed, and Sovereign Descends the World's head was directly sent flying. Thump! The light of the sword was extremely fast, and even after Sovereign Descends the World's head was cut off, Sovereign Descends the World was still alive. The moment his head turned around, he saw a tall and sturdy orc with a long sword in his hand standing behind him. Who else could it be but Old Wang? "Hey slash!" Old Wang spat at Sovereign Descends the World's corpse and said in disdain, "What a shameless, boastful fellow!" To move unhindered, the players seemed to have understood something when they saw this. However, understanding seemed to be useless at this time, because the instant Old Wang killed Sovereign Descends the World, the Wang Yu brothers also made their move. "Boss, kill the warlock first." Evildoers Run Wild stretched out his hands and casually tossed the two players in front of him down the tower. At the same time, he reminded Wang Yu. Wang Yu was a veteran of hundreds of battles, so he naturally didn't need Evildoers Run Wild to teach him how to fight. The warlock class had always been a headache for Wang Yu. Therefore, Wang Yu's first move was to target the warlock players. To move unhindered, the players also realized Wang Yu's intentions, and they hurriedly changed their formation to block the warlock players in an attempt to protect the core of the team. Unfortunately, even with Wang Yu's strength, Sovereign Descends the World couldn't last a single round against him. Naturally, these players were no match for him. Wang Yu raised his right hand, and a white light flew out and wrapped around one of the warlocks. Then, with a casual swing of his hand, the warlock was forcibly dragged down the stairs. At the same time, another warlock raised his staff and attempted to cast a spell. Wang Yu swung his left hand, and a long staff shot out diagonally. Bang! The long staff pierced through the crowd and accurately stabbed into the warlock's mouth while he was chanting a spell. Chapter 1624. Go down! At this moment, Wang Yu, who was at the other end of the staff, shouted. He grabbed the staff with both hands and swung it to the side. The warlock was involuntarily swung down. Not only the warlock, but the other players on the stairs were also affected. After all, Wang Yu was standing on the 6th floor. To move unhindered players were standing on the 7th floor. The players around Wang Yu were all ranged players. Priests, warlocks, and archers, none of them could take a beating. What kind of strength did Wang Yu have? How could this bunch of weaklings withstand it? Wang Yu used the staff as an AoE weapon. To move unhindered players on the stairs were like dumplings falling into a pot. They were swung down by Wang Yu. The height of the sixth floor was even higher than the city walls. Even the thick-skinned holy knights could fall to their deaths, let alone the backline professions. Most of them would die on the spot. Even if they were lucky enough to survive the fall, they wouldn't have a good time either. After all, there was Old Man Wang keeping watch downstairs. These players from Unhindered had a strong desire to survive. They attacked Old Wang the moment they landed on the ground. Old Wang raised his sword and slashed it down. Luo 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 luo. White light rose into the air, and it was a beautiful sight to behold from above. With Wang Yu around, the warlock to move unhindered players were completely useless. Without the warlock's strong crowd control, who could stop evildoers run wild? To move unhindered players against evildoers run wild were a little afraid. Now that evildoers run wild was no longer intimidating, they were even more shocked. Everyone, let's go. The group looked at each other. There was a wolf in front of them, a tiger behind them, and a crocodile below them. What was despair? They knew that they would die if they fought, and they would die if they didn't. In desperation, the group raised their shields and pounced on evildoers run wild. Good timing. Evildoers run wild had been suppressed and beaten up all the way, so he had a belly full of anger. At this moment, he had no scruples. Seeing that his opponents were swarming towards him, he simply stomped his feet and stood firmly. With a loud shout, he pushed both of his palms forward, and his palms hit the shields of his opponents. Evildoers Run Wild did not lack money, equipment, techniques, or strength. With this push, the two shield-wielding players in front of them lost their balance and fell heavily to the ground. Evildoers Run Wild's strength was already quite high, and with the addition of two shield warriors, one could just imagine how powerful they would be. Boom! The two shield warriors smashed into the players behind them, causing them to lose their balance. As more and more people joined the fight, the momentum of the fight grew stronger and stronger. Rumble, with a series of sounds, a group of players in the front row rolled down the stairs like a rolling snowball, breaking through the handrail and falling downstairs. Old Wang, who was downstairs, raised his blade and followed after them, leaving no one alive. Wang Yu, with his staff in hand, controlled the entire situation, beating the backline players until they couldn't even let out a fart. Evildoers Run Wild was in charge of charging forward, knocking the opponents into a complete mess. Old Wang, on the other hand, squatted downstairs with his blade in hand, chopping down every enemy that came his way. The three of them worked together seamlessly. The players that Sovereign Descends brought to surround Evildoers Run Wild were all his subordinates. To move unhindered experts, Sovereign Descends couldn't command them. Therefore, even though City of Sin had a lot of people, there weren't many experts who could take charge of an area by themselves. For example, the players in the tower might be considered elites among Sovereign Descend's subordinates, but that was all they could do. They couldn't even take care of a single Evildoers Run Wild with so many people, let alone Evildoers Run Wild with two more helpers who were even stronger than him. To move unhindered players in the tower were beaten up by Wang Yu, Old Wang, and Old Wang until they had nowhere to run. White light flashed inside the tower, and screams of pain rang out. Even through the door, the players outside could hear what was going on inside. When everyone heard this, they all kept quiet out of fear, not daring to take even half a step forward. It was at this moment that Sovereign Descends, who had revived, ran back. When he saw his subordinates standing outside the door and watching the show from afar, he immediately became furious and shouted, "What are you guys standing there for? Hold your ground. As long as they come out, don't leave a single one alive." When everyone heard Sovereign Descend's words, they all wore disdainful expressions. "Damn it, you've already been killed, and you still say that you won't leave anyone alive? How can you be so thick-skinned?" To move unhindered players were all minors, and none of them were complete idiots. They all had their own plans in mind. Right now, everyone could tell that the three people inside the tower were all terrifyingly strong. The weakest among them, evildoers run wild, was already enough to give them a hard time. Now there was also the so-called number one expert, Wang Yu, and an unfathomable beastman uncle. What was even worse was that these three people had a bunch of immoral helpers, and the wave of attacks just now had brought disaster to many of our guild members. Who would dare to challenge them now? If they did, they would die. Lives in the game were worthless, but if they knew that they would die, wouldn't they be idiots? They were all smart people. They could die, but they couldn't be idiots. Damn it! Seeing that none of his subordinates dared to surround them, Sovereign Descends felt awkward. It wasn't as if Sovereign Descends the world had never thought of such a situation. After all, compared to himself, most of the players in Unhindered were the type of people who were content with a little bit of wealth. The evildoer Rampage was supporting them with a monthly salary of tens of thousands of RMB. Who would want to rebel? Now that they were in such a situation, it was normal for them to retreat. Of course, the fact that Sovereign Descends could trick everyone into rebelling with him showed that he was also an expert at brainwashing. Seeing that everyone had the intention to retreat, Sovereign Descends pondered for a moment and shouted, "Do you think you'll be fine if you don't charge forward? We've already made our move, and there's no turning back. If we don't kill evildoers run wild and get your contracts, none of us will be able to escape." Hearing Sovereign Descends' words, everyone's heart trembled. To move unhindered, wasn't it for the sake of a stable job and to surround evildoers run wild? It was also for the sake of advancing further. But once they boarded the pirate ship, they couldn't get off. Everyone was labeled as a rebel. Evildoers Run Wild had always been a decisive killer. Naturally, he wouldn't spare them just because they didn't attack him. Now they had no choice but to cut off their means of retreat. Seeing that his subordinates' expressions had changed, Sovereign Descends continued, "Now that the three in the tower are blacklisted, as long as you guys can kill them, their equipment will belong to everyone. I don't want a single one of them. Also, if you can kill them, you'll be my right-hand man from now on." Chapter 1625. It had to be said that even though Sovereign Descend's character wasn't all that great, he was still very good at conning people. This set of coaxing and scaring words quickly stabilized the morale of the army and gathered the scattered subordinates back together. There would always be brave men with great rewards. None of them could escape in the first place. Now that there was such a temptation, how could they not give it a try? Even if it wasn't for survival, even if it was for equipment, there was no reason for them to escape. Under Sovereign Descend's encouragement, the players once again spread out into formation. The tanks were at the front, the damage dealers were at the back, and the control players were at the flank. Layers upon layers of players surrounded the mage tower like an iron bucket. The players outside the formation were ready on the street. Even if Wang Yu and the others were lucky enough to escape the encirclement, they would only fall back into another encirclement. Sovereign Descent stood on a high vantage point and looked at the players on the streets, shoulder to shoulder. He then glanced at the mage tower that was tightly surrounded. The gloominess he felt when he was thrown off the building by Wang Yu was swept away and replaced with lofty sentiments. Of course, Sovereign Descent couldn't be blamed for not learning from his mistake. Not to mention ambitious players like Monarch Descends, even a happy-go-lucky player with no fighting spirit would feel their head swell with pride at the thought of being able to command tens of thousands of players with a wave of his hand. After all, authority was something that stimulated people's brains. Even a QQ group owner with a small amount of authority would speak in an unyielding manner. Right now, a single word from Sovereign Descent could make tens of thousands of fully armed players throw their lives away for him. It was easy to imagine how excited he was. It was like a certain religion with a Samsung phone. Wherever he pointed, it would explode. Damn it, no matter how strong you are, can you break through tens of thousands of people? To move unhindered in the Mage Tower, there were only 100 or so players. If it were any other player, they would definitely waste a lot of time and effort to deal with so many enemies. However, in front of monsters like Wang Yu and the others, 100 or so players really wasn't much. Just as Sovereign Descent was tempting the players, the three of them effortlessly sent all the players out of the tower. Dad, boss, if you guys had come any later, I would have been dead. Even though Evildoers Run Wild was a boss and had millions of players under his command, in front of Wang Yu and Lao Wang, Evildoers Run Wild was still a child. After clearing out all his opponents, Evildoers Run Wild's tense heartstrings finally relaxed. For a moment, he felt wronged, depressed, afraid. All sorts of emotions welled up in his heart. Looking at his father and brother who had come to save him, Evildoers Run Wild almost cried on the spot. Wang Yu and Lao Wang were both smart people. To move unhindered, they could more or less guess the reason for the internal strife. At that moment, when they saw Evildoers Run Wild's appearance, the two of them felt somewhat guilty and were not in the mood to laugh at Evildoers Run Wild. After all, this was the most uncomfortable moment for Evildoers Run Wild. He had worked so hard to run the guild and provide employment for so many of his subordinates, but in the end, his subordinates betrayed him. Even if Evildoers Run Wild and his subordinates had a mutually beneficial relationship, this sudden incident still made Evildoers Run Wild feel as if he had met an ungrateful person. Anyone who had experienced betrayal would know. All right, it's not a big deal. It's all in the past. Lao Wang hugged Evildoers Run Wild's shoulder and hugged him. He patted Evildoers Run Wild's shoulder and said, "Isn't it just internal strife? If they don't want to play with you, I'll play with you." "You're not playing with me," Evildoers Run Wild said unhappily. "This is my career." All right, career? Lao Wang said helplessly. "In any case, your brother will definitely have a way. F***ck. What can I do?" Hearing Lao Wang's words, Wang Yu was depressed. Old men love young children. Such a simple sentence, but when Lao Wang said it, it made people feel so good. Although Wang Yu knew that he had his own reasons for this, to move unhindered wasn't a small guild with tens of thousands of people. If it was like the Blood Alliance with tens of thousands of people in one city, then it would be fine. With Wang Yu and Xuanzhen's abilities, even if they couldn't kill the other party, they would be able to peel off a layer of skin. To move unhindered, what kind of guild was that? It spanned over 300 cities in the game and had millions of players. If such a huge mess messed up, where would Wang Yu go to clean it up? To make his younger son happy, Lao Wang spoke irresponsibly. Wasn't his eldest son still his son? Haha, Lao Wang saw that Wang Yu was anxious and laughed out loud. "I was just casually saying it. Don't mind the details." When Wang Yu and Evildoers Run Wild heard this, they were speechless. This old man really treated them like kids and played with them. Then what should we do now? After thinking for a moment, Evildoers Run Wild looked at Wang Yu and Xuanzhen and asked. The enemies in the tower had been wiped clean, but the evildoers had only been spared. Everyone knew what was going on. Unhindered was such a huge organization, and it was not unknown how many evildoers were lurking in the shadows. Now that something like this had happened, there were bound to be others watching. Since things had come to this, naturally, this matter would not end just like that. To move unhindered right now was the same as the Three Fiends' Manor in the past. Every guild had their own forces, and although they hadn't fully matured yet, they could at least see the outline. The boss, Rampant Demon, also had subordinates under him. However, it was only a small portion of his forces. The other players who were in control of their respective guilds were quietly observing the situation and waiting to pick a side. They wouldn't side with Monarch Descends or Rampant Demon. Therefore, the first shot had to be fired. Winning or losing wasn't important. Choosing a side was the most important. Of course, they would help whoever was stronger. If Evildoers Run Wild could survive this battle, then the other guilds would once again be intimidated by Evildoers Run Wild. When that time came, they would naturally side with evildoers run wild. If evildoers run wild lost his guild leader's token or contract, then Monarch Descends would obviously have the upper hand. Naturally, everyone would side with Monarch Descends. Otherwise, Monarch Descends wouldn't have set up such a huge trap, isolating the monster rampage in such a godforsaken place, all for the sake of easily winning the first round. What else can we do? Old Wang and Wang Yu had never experienced something like this before, so they were a little confused by evildoers run wild's question. Wang Yu scratched the back of his head and said, "I don't think this is a good place to be. We should find a safe place first and come up with a plan." Wang Yu had seen the players outside when they entered. There was a sea of players waiting outside, and who knew when they would charge in. It wasn't a good idea to stay here. If he wanted to come up with a plan, he would have to ask Wuji for advice. "Alright, then let's get out of here first." Chapter 16:26. Not good! However, the instant evildoers run wild opened the door, Wang Yu and Old Wang simultaneously froze. They felt an overwhelming killing intent rush into the tower. At the same time, Sovereign Descent saw evildoers run wild open the door and immediately ordered, "Attack!" Whoosh whoosh whoosh, boom boom boom. In the blink of an eye, spells and arrows rained down on Rampage's head like a torrential downpour. If it was Wang Yu, he would definitely be able to dodge these attacks easily. However, evildoers run wild was a grandmaster of combat who focused all of his stat points on strength. His equipment leaned towards strength, and his agility was relatively weak. Although evildoers run wild reacted quickly and knew to use his legs to dodge, his agility was limited. Evildoers run wild could not die. There were so many people outside the door, and evildoers run wild's name was already so red that it was almost black. If he dared to die, the system would make sure that even his underwear would be revealed. Seeing that evildoers run wild was about to be bombarded to death, Wang Yu immediately jumped back and slapped his hand forward. A white light wrapped around evildoers run wild's waist and pulled evildoers run wild behind him. Then, he raised his shield in front of him. Rumble, 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 rumble. At the same time, countless arrows and spells rained down on the place where evildoers run wild had just stood. If not for the sturdiness of the magic tower, this wave of attacks would have leveled it to the ground. Even so, the entire magic tower was shaken and filled with smoke. Some of the attacks even made it through the door and into the magic tower. Fortunately, Wang Yu raised his shield and barely withstood this wave of attacks. There was strength in numbers. Sure enough, it wasn't just a saying. A wave of nearly 10,000 people attacking at the same time was actually this powerful. Kill! As Confucius said, there is smoke, there is no harm. Without waiting for the smoke to disperse, the frontline classes of Unhindered let out a roar, raised their shields, and charged into the tower. Unfortunately, the entrance to the Mage Tower wasn't very wide. Shield warriors, who were in the front row, could only fit 2 people at a time. Lao Wang stood at the door. Although the smoke had not dispersed, he could clearly sense that someone had rushed to the door. Thus, he opened his hands, grabbed the 2 doors, and suddenly closed them. Bang! The shield warrior slammed into the tower's doors, shattering them into pieces and sending them flying into the tower. Lao Wang was ready for battle. When he saw that the wooden door had been knocked open, Lao Wang took a step forward. Closely after, he leaped up and pressed his hands against the ground. His feet suddenly stepped on the edge of their shield. Dong dong! With 2 soul-shaking muffled sounds, the 2 shield-bearers suddenly felt an overwhelming force coming from their shields. Lao Wang didn't kick the middle of the shields. Instead, he kicked the inner edges of the 2 shields. With this kick, the 2 shield-bearers turned 180 degrees uncontrollably, leaving their backs to Lao Wang. Lao Wang stood up and didn't stop. He drew his sword with his right hand and suddenly turned his waist. Then, he slashed at the back of their necks with his black sword. Pft pft. Lao Wang's night demon blade accurately chopped at the necks of the 2, and their heads were sent flying. As he had attacked too quickly, the corpses of the two shield-bearers stopped for almost 2 minutes before turning into white light. Instantly, the entire arena fell silent. This was especially so for Sovereign Descends and the others who had been slashed by Lao Wang. They subconsciously took 2 steps back. Others didn't know how powerful Lao Wang was, but Sovereign Descends and the others who had been killed by Lao Wang were very clear about it. Shield warriors had the highest HP and defense among all the professions. Even pure damage output professions didn't dare to say that they could kill a shield warrior in one move. However, not only had Lao Wang done it, he had done it so cleanly. What was even more terrifying was that this old man had instantly killed a shield warrior. There had never been anyone who could last more than 2 slashes from him. Damn, evildoers run wild, and Wang, you were already so terrifying, but this orc was even more terrifying than them. One evildoers run wild was already a 1 in a million peerless expert. Now, 3 of them had suddenly appeared. From what evildoers run wild had said, Wang Yu was his elder brother, and the orc was his father. Even a family of 3 was so fierce. What kind of people had he provoked? Would there be a group of uncles? When he thought of this, Sovereign Descends suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. When people were afraid, it was easier for them to lose their rationality. Seeing how powerful Lao Wang was, Sovereign Descends became hot-headed and shouted, "What are you all looking at? Keep going!" Hearing Sovereign Descends roar, the players trembled and immediately recovered from their shock. They raised their weapons and rushed forward. Lao Wang and Wang Yu looked at each other and stood on the left and right sides of the door. Facing the players rushing in, Wang Yu extended her long staff towards the door and immediately tripped the target, causing him to lose his balance. Lao Wang followed from the other side and chopped off the heads of the players on the ground, as if he was chopping vegetables. A professional killer's methods were brilliant, ruthless, and precise. The laymen outside the door were dumbfounded and flabbergasted by what they saw. In the beginning, everyone still thought that they were lucky and rushed forward without any regard for their lives. However, after a few waves, they finally understood what kind of monster their opponent was and didn't dare to take another step forward. Sovereign Descends was so angry that he shouted at the top of his lungs, "Charge, charge! Don't be afraid, don't be afraid! Tisk!" Hearing Sovereign Descends' words, everyone curled their lips. "Go to hell! You're not the one who's going to die!" Seeing that the enemies outside the door were terrified, Lao Wang said proudly, "A bunch of idiots. They don't even look at the geography before rushing forward." Geography. Hearing that, Wang Yu seemed to have thought of something. He looked at the broken door and the mage tower that was full of traces of magic. He couldn't help but frown. "What's wrong?" Seeing this, evildoers run wild asked in confusion, "Is there something wrong?" "Yes." Wang Yu nodded. "This tower is a building that can be destroyed." It was true that Wang Yu was a noob in the game, but he had traveled extensively in the game and could be considered a knowledgeable person. Not long ago, Wang Yu had destroyed a tower that was much grander than the mage tower. At the same time, Sovereign Descends was also tired of shouting and cursed angrily, "Damn it, how can a bunch of overcautious people like them do anything big with me?" At this time, a girl named Black Sky White Knight beside Sovereign Descends looked at the mage tower and pondered for a moment before saying, "Boss, I'm afraid it's not a good idea to charge forward like this." "Then what should we do?" Sovereign Descends said gloomily, "If they hide inside and refuse to come out, we can't just stand there and wait, can we? Tens of thousands of people against 3 people, it was obvious who would be at a disadvantage. Moreover, Sovereign Descends' subordinates were all professional players. No. Chapter 16:27. As expected, there were no fools in this world. Those who treated others as fools were the ones who were fools. To move unhindered meant that there was a way to do this. To move unhindered, players could sense what Wang Yu was able to sense. After the previous wave of bombardment, although the target wasn't the magic tower, The area affected by the players' attacks was riddled with scars. It was obvious that this magic tower could be destroyed. Since the target was hiding in the magic tower, they might as well destroy the magic tower. If a normal person heard this, they would definitely think that he was boasting. However, it was an easy feat for Sovereign Descent. Tens of thousands of players. If they attacked together, even a boss could be wiped out in one wave. Sovereign Descent looked in the direction Black Sky and White Knight was pointing. He immediately nodded and said, "All right, let's do it." Then, Sovereign Descent ordered, "Everyone, don't charge. Attack the magic tower." Everyone was dumbfounded when they heard Sovereign Descent's order. Although they didn't understand why Sovereign Descent wanted to go against the magic tower, since the boss had given the order, they would follow through. Thus, under Sovereign Descent's command, all players aimed their weapons at the magic tower. Open fire! Following Sovereign Descent's command, magic arrows filled the sky and rained down on the magic tower. Boom! The magic tower was reduced to rubble after the first wave of attack. It was on the verge of collapse. The inside of the magic tower shook as if there was an earthquake. Dust fell from the top of the magic tower, and even the stairs began to crack. Fortunately, both Wang Yu and Old Wang were experts in martial art. They were able to stand firm in this situation without losing their balance. Evildoers Run Wild's martial arts were relatively weaker. After Sovereign Descent's attack, Evildoers Run Wild was in the most difficult position. He only managed to stabilize himself after leaning against the wall. Damn! What I was afraid of really happened. After stabilizing himself, Evildoers Run Wild wiped the sweat off his forehead. He couldn't help but exclaim, "Boss, let's find a chance to charge out. I don't think this magic tower can last much longer." Charge out? Lao Wang slapped the back of Evildoers Run Wild's head angrily. "Are you stupid? Do you think that we can survive if we rush out? Wasn't that right?" The reason why Monarch Descends had attacked the magic tower was because Wang Yu and the others weren't willing to go out. Right now, over 10,000 players were staring at the entrance of the magic tower. If they went out, they would definitely be targeted. Wang Yu and Lao Wang were still alright. Wang Yu was agile and had Qing Gong, so he could run if he wanted to. Although Lao Wang had also added his strength stat points, his agility was not as good as Wang Yu's. However, the only valuable item on this old man's body was that broken blade. If he died, then so be it. However, not only did Evildoers Run Wild have a full set of top-tier equipment, but he also carried everyone's contracts in his bag. To move unhindered, he even had the guild leader's token in his hand. Contracts could be traded, but the guild leader's token could only be dropped. If Evildoers Run Wild died, everything would be over. "Why don't I transfer the guild to you?" As he spoke, Evildoers Run Wild was about to give the guild to Wang Yu. After all, Wang Yu was the only one who could escape. "It's useless." Wang Yu waved his hand. "I have a guild now." Wang Yu was a member of a guild. If he accepted Evildoers Run Wild's gift, he would have to leave Chuanjin. Even if he knew that it was just a formality, he would still have to wait 24 hours after leaving the guild before he could join a new one. This magic tower was already in such a state after just one wave of attacks. How could he wait 24 hours? Dream on. Then what do we do? Seeing that Wang Yu wasn't willing to accept the gift, Evildoers Run Wild grew anxious. Damn it, I can't let this guild fall into the hands of Monarch Descends, can I? If that happens, I'd rather disband Evildoers Run Wild. But then again, guilds were dead, people were alive. The reason why Monarch Descends wanted to form a new guild was because he wanted to establish a new one. If Evildoers Run Wild forcefully disbanded the guild, not only would they have to pay a large sum of money, but they would also be playing into Monarch Descends' hands. For a moment, Evildoers Run Wild was at a loss. However, Wang Yu's expression was extremely calm. He looked outside the tower and said indifferently, "Don't worry, let's wait here for a few more minutes." What are we waiting for? Are we going to be rescued by reinforcements in a few minutes? Evildoers Run Wild roared anxiously. Right now, there were tens of thousands of people standing outside. The entire city of Sin was packed to the brim, and even Wang Yu was trapped here. Who in the world could break through the encirclement and rescue him? That's right. Let's just wait. Wang Yu nodded with a smile. Fuck. Evildoers Run Wild grumbled gloomily. Once I get out of here, I'll reset my stats and add full agility to move unhindered outside the magic tower. When the players saw that their attacks were actually effective against the magic tower, they immediately understood Monarch Descend's intentions. Only when they knew what to do would they be able to attack properly. Therefore, everyone was overjoyed. Under Monarch Descend's command, they launched a second wave of attack. Rumble, 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 rumble. When the second wave of attacks landed, the magic tower was like a leaf in the wind. It wriggled and wriggled as bricks and stones were blasted everywhere. Then came the third wave of attacks. It had to be said that the magic tower was the symbol of a main city. Although the city of Sin was only a town, the quality of the magic tower was still very good. After taking a few consecutive bombardments from unhindered the world, it was on the verge of collapsing. Even though it was riddled with holes, it still stood firm, showing no signs of collapsing. Be it Wang Yu or the members of Reigning the World, they could all tell that the magic tower could not withstand more than a few waves of attack. It's over, it's over. Evildoers Run Wild was at a loss when he saw that the magic tower was about to collapse. It's coming. Just as Evildoers Run Wild was muttering to himself, Wang Yu's expression suddenly tightened. He looked at the horizon and said to Evildoers Run Wild, "Summon your wings and prepare to fly. Let's go." Huh? Who's coming? Evildoers Run Wild followed Wang Yu's gaze and looked into the distance. He saw a few black dots on the horizon, flying towards the magic tower. When he saw the black figures, Evildoers Run Wild exclaimed, Isn't that Wuji and the others?" "Yes, it's them." Wang Yu nodded. "Fuck. What's the use of them coming?" Originally, Evildoers Run Wild still had a glimmer of hope. However, when he heard that it was Wuji and the others, Evildoers Run Wild once again showed a look of despair. Although the experts from the Chuanjian sect were strong, they weren't at the level where they could penetrate the heavens and the earth. Even a heaven-defying expert like Wang Yu was surrounded like a sandbag. Could it be that these guys were going to die together with him? What do you know? Chapter 1628. After hearing Lao Wang's words, Evildoers Run Wild looked into the distance again. At that moment, Wuji and the others were getting closer, and Evildoers Run Wild could see them more clearly. There was nothing wrong with Wuji and the others flying in the sky, but there was a dazzling white light beneath them. It was as if a plane had dropped a bomb. Everywhere they went was a mess, and the players outside the encirclement fled in all directions in shock, as if they had seen a ghost. What the hell is going on? Did Bao San refine uranium-235 in the game? Evildoers Run Wild and Chuanjian had competed together before, so he naturally knew Bao San's occupation in real life. However, when Chuanjian and the others broke through the encirclement outside the magic tower, Evildoers Run Wild was instantly dumbfounded. What the F***CK? Each of these guys had a guard following behind them. This was 2F** King Shameless. When he saw his former formation of 10,000 people being torn apart by the guards led by Chuanjian and the others, Evildoers Run Wild felt very complicated. Indeed, even the strongest expert among players like Wang Yu would find it difficult to break through Unhindered's 10,000-man formation. However, there would always be someone stronger than you, and there would always be someone stronger than you. In front of the system guards, these players were no different from paper. Without the slightest bit of effort, the system guards slaughtered them all. The players on the forum often discussed like primary school students who was the strongest existence in the game. Was it the Dragon Emperor Dales, the Light God Luke, or the great god Iron Ox who had stepped on them. Today, it was clear who was truly invincible in the world. This works too? After a long time, evildoers run wild asked speechlessly. Clearly, this kid was beaten up so badly that he didn't even have the time to call for help, so he didn't know what was happening outside the tower. When he saw Wuji and the rest charging around with the guards, he found it hard to accept. Wang Yu glanced at evildoers run wild and said, "Nonsense, how do you think we broke through the layers of encirclement and killed our way into the tower? Awesome. Too awesome. As expected of Boss Wuji. He's so evil that he has no conscience." Evildoers Run Wild sincerely praised. In the past, evildoers Run Wild thought that Wuji was just a wretched cleric without any strength. There was no reason for a guild like the Blood Alliance to be afraid of Wuji. But now, evildoers Run Wild finally understood why when people talked about Wang Yu, they would always compare him to this cleric. Damn, cultured people are the most inhumane when they're angry. Monarch Descends the World was not the only one who was shocked by the sudden appearance of these monsters. He too was shocked when he saw the formation of his subordinates being scattered. He asked in astonishment, What's going on? When Sovereign Descends was inside the tower, he had only received news that someone had made it to the front of the tower. As for how they broke through the encirclement, Sovereign Descends was completely confused. Now that he saw Wuji and the others returning with the guards, he was naturally dumbfounded. It seems like their reinforcements have arrived. Black Sky and White Knight glanced at the guards charging back and forth on the street. His expression immediately darkened. Sovereign Descends the World panicked. He didn't even bother to see who his opponent was. His eyes were bloodshot as he shouted, "Stop them! Stop them! Stop them! Stop them!" His eyes were bloodshot as he roared, "Stop them! Stop the guards?" No one knew who gave Sovereign Descends the courage to do so. Even a celestial boss could not withstand a single blow from the powerful guards, let alone a group of players. Under the leadership of Wuji and the others, the dozen or so city guards rampaged through the streets without the slightest scruple. It was as if there was no one there. As for the players from Reigning the World, they were like clay chickens and pottery dogs in the face of the city guards. They died as soon as they touched them. To move unhindered players in the City of Sin were either dead or injured in just a few exchanges. The formation of the players surrounding the Mage Tower was also broken. To move unhindered players were scared out of their wits under the tyranny of the guards. They cried and screamed as they ran for their lives, afraid that they would be trampled to death by the guards if they were too slow. In an instant, Unhindered's formation was thrown into chaos. No matter how Sovereign Descends the World shouted, it was already too late to turn the situation around. "Let's go." Seeing that the players outside the Mage Tower only cared about running for their lives and no longer had the mood to care about anything else, Wang Yu and the other two rushed out of the tower. Then, the two of them grabbed old Wang's shoulders, spread their wings, and soared into the sky. In the blink of an eye, they were out of the archers' shooting range. Retreat. In the sky, when Wuji and the others saw that Wang Yu had rescued evildoers Run Wild, they immediately gave the order to retreat in the group chat. When the Chuanjian group received the order, they did not say anything else. They immediately left the guards behind and flew into the sky. Before they left, Mingdu did not forget to throw a few spells to liven things up. To move unhindered players, who were already running away like rats, were even more troubled. The range of the guards' aggro was limited. In the beginning, the people from the Quanzhen sect were within the guards' field of vision, so they naturally chased after them relentlessly. At this moment, the people from the Quanzhen sect directly flew into the sky. The guard had no choice but to obediently return to his original post. F***CK. Looking at evildoers Run Wild and Chuanjian group flying further and further away, the Sovereign Descends was so angry that he almost fainted. All their efforts had gone to waste. In order to kill evildoers Run Wild, The sovereign descends had deliberately tricked evildoers run wild into the city of sin in the name of clearing contracts and expelling players from unsigned guild. They had even set up a trap to ensure that nothing would go wrong. They had thought that they would be able to completely eliminate evildoers run wild. However, just as the sovereign descends was about to succeed, a group of malefactors appeared. The sovereign descends felt bitter. It felt like they had just written 10,000 words and had not saved them when the power suddenly went out. They were so angry that they trembled. Of course, they did not know how angry they were if they did not write. Uncle Nyo even smashed his computer because of this. Uncle Nyo could still vent his anger on his computer, but what could the sovereign descends do about it? Kill the guards to vent their anger? What a joke! Hadn't they suffered enough? Continue to chase after evildoers run wild? Stop messing around. Leaving aside the question of whether or not he could catch up to them, how many players in Unhindered the World could fly? It was not like the sovereign descends had never seen Wang Yu and the others' abilities. So what if they sent a few dozen people to chase after evildoers run wild? In the end, they would still be the ones to embarrass themselves. Oh! In his anger, the sovereign descends could only let out a long roar. To move unhindered was so shocked that everyone turned to look at him. Fuck, is this bastard crazy? Chapter 1629. D*MN. Something big happened. To move unhindered boss evildoers run wild has been blocked. Evildoers run wild? No way. To move unhindered. Who dares to block him? Do they not want to live anymore? Haha. No one is going to stop him. It's his own subordinates. Right now, that brat is in the city of sin, and he's surrounded by 3 layers inside and 3 layers outside. Is that true? Haha. Interesting. A dog bites another dog. Even though Unhindered the World was a guild that did business and usually kept a low profile, they were not very friendly towards players from other guilds, especially in the mining area. It would not be an exaggeration to describe the players from Unhindered the World as arrogant and despotic. To move unhindered players wasn't the only one. To move unhindered players, even players from big guilds had been bullied by them. Even someone like Wang Yu had seen the aura of a player to move unhindered. But so what? To move unhindered was a huge guild that normal people couldn't afford to offend. Big guilds didn't want to offend such a huge entity, so they could only swallow their anger. To move unhindered, as the guild leader of evildoers run wild, his reputation naturally wasn't good. Moreover, this guy's reputation came from fighting for territory in the early stages. At this moment, when they heard that Unhindered was in a state of internal strife and that a monster was running amok, surrounded by tens of thousands of his underlings like a stray dog, not only did the onlookers not feel any heartache, but they all laughed at the monster running amok. As for those large guilds, they had been eyeing the juicy piece of meat that was Unhindered for quite some time now. Naturally, everyone knew that Unhindered was in a state of internal strife. This was definitely a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. If they didn't hit Unhindered while it was down, then when, after receiving news of Unhindered's internal strife, almost at the same time, all the major guilds in the main cities in the game, including the Blood Alliance, hurriedly held a guild meeting. Benefits were always paramount. Blood Red War Flag and Chuanjin had a good personal relationship, but such a large guild needed to eat and drink. After all, the later stages of a large guild's development depended on annexing smaller guild. To move Unhindered did not just represent one guild, but also the entire mining area in the game. This was an absolute benefit, so how could Blood Red War Flag turn a blind eye? In other words, if Chuanjin was in Blood Alliance's position, they would have done the same thing. To move Unhindered, chaos ensued so quickly. Looks like evildoers run wild is still not good enough. Within the Blood Alliance office, the leaders of the Blood Alliance sighed about what had happened today. Indeed, to move Unhindered, it had always been calm and peaceful. It basically didn't care about the affairs of the world and didn't have much contact with the outside world. Who would have thought that there would suddenly be internal chaos? This was something that no one had expected. What's so surprising about this? Seeing everyone's expression, Blood Wind Whisperer pouted. The guild is so big, but it doesn't have any true faith and cohesion. It's only a matter of time before something happens. I think our top priority is to discuss what we should do. Blood Wind Whisperer still had a lot of power in Blood Alliance. These words were also heard by Blood Red War Flag. Hearing Blood Wind Whisperer say this, Blood Red War Flag asked with interest, "Then Wind Whisperer, what do you think we should do? Do you even need to ask?" Blood Wind Whisperer pointed at the mining area on the map. To move unhindered, their major forces are also restless. They definitely won't have time to care about the mining area. Of course, we have to go and snatch the mining area as soon as possible. Damn, Wind Whisperer, are you crazy? The other members of the Blood Alliance frowned when they heard this. Blood Azura, the dumbass, was even more shocked. Snatching Unhindered's territory, do you know how many people they have? To move unhindered and gather 1,000,000 troops was something all newbies knew. Although Blood Red War Flag wasn't small, they only had tens of thousands of people. Wasn't it suicidal for tens of thousands of people to snatch the territory of millions of people? Humph. Blood Wind Whisperer snorted. To move unhindered with 1,000,000 troops is history. Now that they even dare to attack their own boss, the roots are already in chaos. The forces within the guild are definitely restless and watching each other. To move unhindered is called to move unhindered. To move unhindered without unity, even you Huiqing won't be able to move unhindered. Wasn't that right? To move unhindered with 1,000,000 troops was the alliance of 300 main cities. However, when they were scattered across the 300 main cities, there were only a few thousand people in each main city. In the game, each main city was actually equivalent to a force. Other than having the title of boss, Evildoers Run Wild's power was basically scattered in the hands of various forces. To move unhindered at this time, even the boss was going to be slaughtered. The various forces definitely wouldn't act rashly and naturally wouldn't care about the other main cities. To move unhindered like this was nothing in front of Blood Alliance. Aren't you afraid of them finding trouble with us after the internal strife? Blood Dark Knight reminded carefully. A starving camel was still bigger than a horse. To move unhindered even if he was sick, once he recovered, Blood Alliance wouldn't be able to offend him. Find trouble with us? Blood Wind Whisper smiled. Do you think that Blood Alliance is the only one keeping an eye on the territory? Chapter 1630. The temptation of getting a bigger share of the mine's profits was quite big. However, compared to offending Chuanjin, it was really a dilemma. Bloody Wind Whisperer was in a dilemma. Seeing Bloody Wind Whisperer's expression, Blood Red War Flag comforted it. You said it yourself. Even if we don't fight for it, someone else will. I know Iron Ox. He definitely won't bother you over such a small matter. I know that, Bloody Wind Whisperer said, but who can say for sure? What if Evildoers Run Wild makes a comeback? All of Bloody Wind Whisperer's deductions were based on the fact that Evildoers Run Wild had been killed. To move unhindered was the reason why they had not split up yet, because Evildoers Run Wild was there to deter them. To move unhindered if Evildoers Run Wild could not make it through this time. To move unhindered would instantly collapse. By then, they would only need to solve the problem of miners. The mine would naturally belong to whoever had the biggest fist. Chuanjin could not find a reason for this. After all, the mine belonged to all the players and not the monsters. Evildoers Run Wild's enemy was his own subordinates, not these guilds that were trying to take advantage of him. However, if Rampage managed to pull through, that would be what everyone was most worried about. Rampage was still a very intimidating existence in the game. As long as his banner did not fall, Unhindered would not be disbanded. A scattered Unhindered might be easy to bully, but a united Unhindered would definitely be the strongest force in the game. Naturally, this mining area would still be the place where Rampage would run amok. Although Evildoers Run Wild was surrounded like a dog, and the chance of him surviving was less than 1 in 10,000, there could not be any mistakes when it came to matters of life and death. Bloody Wind Whisperer was very calculative. It did not matter if he instigated others to do it, but it was another matter if he was the scapegoat. "Don't worry." Blood Red War Flag patted Bloody Wind Whisperer's shoulder and said, "Others might not know how strong Evildoers Run Wild is, but to move unhindered wouldn't know. If they dare to block Evildoers Run Wild, they must be prepared. Evildoers Run Wild has no chance." "Really?" Bloody Wind Whisperer rolled its eyes at Blood Red War Flag and said, "Do you think Xuanzhen won't get involved?" Hearing Bloody Wind Whisperer's words, Blood Red War Flag felt a chill down its back. If the other guilds heard that the Quanzhen sect was involved in this matter, they would definitely not think much of it. How much of a storm could a mere dozen or so people cause in a fight between millions of people? However, as the guild leader of a guild that had dealings with the Quanzhen sect for many years, Blood Red War Flag knew how powerful those bastards from the Quanzhen sect were. Let's not talk about Wang Yu, the world's #1 fighter who was ruthless enough to hunt down thousands of guilds for no reason. Just Wu Ji alone was enough to give everyone a hard time. Although in terms of skills, Wu Ji was much weaker than Wang Yu, his destructive power was not inferior to Wang Yu's. With these guys together, anything was possible. Perhaps with Xuanzhen gone, Evildoers Run Wild would really be able to make a comeback. Before they knew about the Quanzhen sect, Blood Red War Flag used to treat these bandits as a bunch of jokes, but now, as an old neighbor of the Quanzhen sect, Blood Red War Flag was definitely very serious about the Quanzhen sect. "Should we rob the mine?" Blood Red War Flag asked after thinking for a moment. What a joke. What if he were to become a freak and make a comeback, offending both the Quanzhen sect and Unhindered World at the same time? That was no joke. "Rob. We have to," Blood Red Wind Whisperer said with certainty. "But we can't use this name to rob." "Then how?" Blood Red War Flag was surprised. Blood Red Wind Whisperer said, "We are brothers with Xuanzhen. Isn't it our duty to help clean up the mess and surround the territory? If Evildoers Run Wild makes a comeback, we'll just return it to him. If he can't, we'll help him develop it. Wouldn't that be great?" "Haha. That makes sense." Blood Red War Flag smiled when it heard what Blood Wind Whisperer said. They were really good at tactics. How could they make it sound so righteous? Blood Red War Flag was a straightforward person. Once they knew what to do, they immediately gave an order in the guild channel. "Everyone, listen to my command. Go and help Brotherhood's guild." Blood Alliance and Xuanzhen were old friends. If they could be so shameless in the face of benefits, the other guilds would be even more so. Seeing that Evildoers Run Wild had lost, they knew that it was over for them. To move unhindered was finished. They didn't think that Blood Alliance would have such concerns and just started robbing. 300 guilds in the main cities attacked a guild that was in internal strife. It was quite a spectacular sight. To move unhindered, each main city had a few thousand players. Although they couldn't compare to the top guilds, they weren't small either. Once they started fighting, there would be tens of thousands of players fighting. What was more terrifying was that it wasn't just in one main city. It was in all the main cities of the heroes' continent. It was easy to imagine the scene when 300 main cities had a battle of this level at the same time. It was like the end of the world. The entire server was in a war zone and people were killing people everywhere. What did it mean to pull one hair and affect the whole body? This was it. From this, it could be seen what kind of impact a guild like Unhindered would have on the game. Seeing such a situation, the game company was overjoyed. The gaming company could see that Unhindered the world was growing stronger by the day. A workshop of this scale could be said to be unprecedented. If Unhindered the world was allowed to grow, it would pose a direct threat to the profits of the gaming company. However, Unhindered the World did not violate any laws or regulations, so the gaming company could not find any reason to punish them. To move unhindered was what the game company wanted to see the most. Fighting and piking were all about resources and equipment. Such an all-out war was the best time for the game company to earn money. Some people were happy while others were sad. To move unhindered players were the most regretful ones. To move unhindered the moment the mining war started, the various powers were in complete chaos. After being domineering for so long, Unhindered the World had become a little overconfident. They thought that the other guilds in the game were just a bunch of nobodies that weren't even worth mentioning. They were so focused on pushing Unhindered the World away that they forgot why the other guilds didn't dare to look them in the eye. Now that those large guilds had suddenly launched an attack, this group of restless fellows had been caught off guard. Chapter 1631. At this point, Sovereign Descends couldn't care less about the fire in his backyard. To move unhindered before evildoers run wild escaped might still be in Sovereign Descends territory. To move unhindered now that evildoers run wild had escaped, how would Sovereign Descends still have anything to do with them? Right now, Sovereign Descend's mind was a complete mess. Right now, he was most worried that the other powers in Unhindered would side with the monstrous genius and target him. Unhindered was a small society, and it was a common occurrence for people to take advantage of someone who was down. The evildoer Rampage had escaped with his life, while the Sovereign Descending the Heavens had clearly lost the advantage of being the first to strike. As such, it was expected that anyone would attack the members of the Sovereign Descending the Heavens. Helpless, Sovereign Descends could only open up his friends list and open the chat window. Boss. Bad news. Evildoers Run Wild escaped. Escaped? The player on the other side was stunned for a long time when he saw Sovereign Descends' message. Didn't you say that it was a foolproof plan? I heard that tens of thousands of players are blocking the entrance to Sin City. How could evildoers run wild escape? Something's wrong. Sovereign Descends wiped the sweat off his forehead. We were so close to killing evildoers run wild. Who the hell knew that he had reinforcements? Reinforcements? The player on the other side pondered for a moment before saying, "How many reinforcements can break through your blockade? I've never heard of a large-scale group battle in Sin City." This, Sovereign Descends was speechless. Not many, only a dozen or so. A dozen or so? Are you King kidding me? Hearing Sovereign Descends' words, the tone of the player on the other side immediately changed. Sovereign Descends had brought tens of thousands of players to stop evildoers run wild. Moreover, he had come up with such a sinister plan to leave evildoers run wild isolated and without reinforcements. But now, Sovereign Descends was saying that evildoers run wild had been rescued by a dozen or so players. This was no longer a matter of whether Sovereign Descends believed him or not. He was obviously questioning Sovereign Descends' intelligence. Even if Sovereign Descends the Heavens claimed that evildoers run wild had over 100,000 helpers, it would still be acceptable. At the very least, it wouldn't be so ridiculous. More than 10 people saved one person from thousands of soldiers and horses. Did they treat themselves as trash or others as idiots? That's right. More than 10 of them. Sovereign Descends was an honest man. Even in the face of the other party's doubt, he still replied with confidence, "Every one of them is a top-tier expert." Moreover, they lured a dozen or so system guards over and broke up my men's formation. System guards. Hearing the words system guard, the person on the other end of the line clearly believed Sovereign Descends' words a little. He then said, "Then why are you sending me a message instead of chasing after him? I'm paying you to do something for me, not to cause trouble." "I know." Sovereign Descends replied helplessly. "To move unhindered right now, there's a fire in our backyard. The mining area is being fought over by the guilds of all the major cities." "Is that so?" The other party was stunned when he heard Sovereign Descend's words. Motherfucker, these bastards really know how to fish in troubled waters. The mining area is going to be gone soon. Should we continue with our plan? Sovereign Descends asked again. To move unhindered mining areas, Sovereign Descends had been instructed by someone to rebel. Now that the mining areas of 300 major cities were being targeted, there was naturally no reason for them to continue. About that, the player on the other end of the line pondered for a moment before saying, "Log off right now and post on the forums. Say that Evildoers Run Wild has killed all of your men." This, Sovereign Descends was stunned. That's not appropriate, right? Wouldn't that be telling everyone that I've been suppressed by Evildoers Run Wild? Those bastards from Unhindered had always been swayed by the wind. They would always side with whoever had the upper hand. Now that the evildoer had escaped, it was undoubtedly a fatal blow to Monarch Descends the World. Monarch Descends the World couldn't wait to cover up the truth. If they were to announce this matter to the world, wouldn't they be digging a hole for themselves? Humph, what do you know? The other party snorted coldly. To move unhindered mining areas in the past, do you know why no one dared to move unhindered? Why? Sovereign Descends was puzzled. Because as long as the evildoers are running amok, you will not be like a plate of loose sand. Who would dare to fight with you for territory? What do you mean? Sovereign Descends asked, not really understanding. As long as we tell everyone that Evildoers Run Wild has quelled the internal strife, the guilds that are fighting over the mining areas will definitely be sitting on pins and needles. The mining areas in their hands will also be a hot potato. When the time comes, these guilds will definitely not keep the mining areas in their hands. They will definitely throw them to me. To move unhindered, then what about the other forces? At the end of the day, Sovereign Descend's brain had yet to wrap itself around the situation. To move unhindered, the other forces would help evildoers run wild to deal with him. Are you stupid? The player on the other end of the line sighed and said angrily, "To move unhindered is what we want. Those old friends of yours have long since been beaten senseless. Who cares who is stronger between you and evildoers run wild?" This, after hearing the other party's words, Sovereign Descends finally understood a little. The boss's goal was very clear. To move unhindered 300 mining areas in major cities. After all, fighting a war burned money. Equipment, supplies, potions, etc. Which one of them wasn't gold and silver? With the boss's methods, not to mention the fact that he wasn't a match for Evildoers Run Wild, even if he could win against Evildoers Run Wild when he woke up, to move unhindered against millions of players would definitely be a fierce battle. How many resources would it take to fight such a large group battle? That definitely wouldn't work. The mining areas were Evildoers Run Wild's cash cow, and Evildoers Run Wild was also someone who had seen the world. There was no way someone like him would kill the goose that laid the golden eggs. After all, this was only the early stages of the game. The true consumption of materials would come in the later stages of the game. Wasn't it ridiculous to sell the mining areas before they were at the peak of their power? To move unhindered, the boss of Sovereign Descends wanted Sovereign Descends to replace Evildoers Run Wild and take down the mining areas without losing a single soldier. Who knew that Evildoers Run Wild would be able to escape under such circumstances, and the other big guilds would hit them when they were down, but this way, the mining areas would become a hot potato. If they took it, Evildoers Run Wild could easily quell the internal strife. It was clear that he was ruthless. No one could afford to offend him. If they didn't take it, they had fought so hard to get it, and they would be unwilling to just throw it away for no reason. At this time, if the boss bought it at a low price, it was basically giving the big guilds a way out. Although the total value of the mining areas from 300 guilds was definitely not cheap, compared to buying it directly from Evildoers Run Wild, these mining areas were practically free. Chapter 1632. Since the boss had made such an appropriate arrangement, Sovereign Descent naturally had no more doubts. As such, He immediately ordered everyone to log off in the party channel and go to the forums to announce that Evildoers Run Wild had defeated him. Tens of thousands of players being killed by a dozen players was naturally not something to be proud of. Sovereign Descent's subordinates were actually quite against Sovereign Descent's decision. However, they couldn't change the fact that Sovereign Descent was the boss now. Everyone was on the same boat now. They couldn't run away even if they wanted to. Moreover, Sovereign Descent was also an expert at painting a picture. With an unfathomable expression, he told everyone that as long as they did as he said, they would definitely live a good life in the future. The reason why everyone followed Sovereign Descent was because they wanted a better future. The temptation this time was quite great, so they no longer complained and logged off. At the same time, in the City of Sin's leveling area, Wang Yu's group found a secluded place to stop after seeing that there were no longer any pursuers. Although Evildoers Run Wild's subordinates had rebelled, as the leader of the guild, Evildoers Run Wild still had a large number of loyal subordinates. With such a huge incident happening in the guild, Evildoers Run Wild's subordinates were naturally not stupid. At this moment, Evildoers Run Wild's message window was already exploding with messages. All of the messages were the same, with only two meanings. In the beginning, all of them were asking, "Boss, how are you doing? Where are you now? We're going to save you." Then, there were anxious messages saying, "Boss, our mining area has been snatched away by those big guilds." Seeing the first part of the message, Evildoers Run Wild was a little touched. At the very least, not all of his subordinates were traitors. However, when he saw the second part of the message, Evildoers Run Wild's heart turned cold. To move unhindered in Rebirth was to establish a foothold in those mining areas. As long as there were mining areas, there would be an iron rice bowl. To move unhindered even if Sovereign Descends revolted against them, as long as the mining areas were still there would be no need to worry about a lack of miners. After all, mining players had to support their families. It was a matter of course that they would follow whoever gave them food. However, now that the mines had been snatched away by other guilds, Evildoers Run Wild's foundation had been snatched away. Naturally, the major guilds would not be short on manpower. Even if the players of Unhindered had the guts to not work for the major guilds would not be worried about the development of the mining area. To move Unhindered aside from the old members of Evildoers Run Wild, most of them were temporary workers. They didn't care about who was the boss. They only cared about whether they could earn money from mining. Therefore, when he heard that someone had taken advantage of the situation to loot the mine, the evildoer rampage immediately deflated like a balloon. Just a moment ago, he had been so confident that he could make a comeback after quelling the rebellion, but now, he was filled with despair. The people of Chuanjin were all wily old foxes. Taking advantage of a burning house was their basic operation. To move unhindered, the people of Chuanjin naturally knew what the other guilds would do after such a huge incident. Seeing Evildoers Run Wild's expression, they instantly guessed what was going on. Looking at the despair on Evildoers Run Wild's face, everyone could understand how Evildoers Run Wild felt. It was as if his own brother had quarreled with him, and his backyard had been robbed by his neighbor. Although Chuanjin had never experienced this kind of grievance before, they could imagine it. After all, this group of people had caused others to feel grievance in the past. Everyone was silent. Only old Wang and Wang Yu patted Evildoers Run Wild's shoulder. They wanted to comfort this pitiful child, but they didn't know where to start. Damn it! After a long while, Evildoers Run Wild stood up from the ground with a whoosh. He immediately said with bloodshot eyes, "Damn it, I'm going to fight this group of bastards to the death." Then, Evildoers Run Wild spread his wings and was about to fly back to the city to fight his enemies to the death. Calm down, calm down. When Wang Yu and old Wang saw this, they were shocked. They hurriedly stretched out their hands and forcefully pressed Evildoers Run Wild to the ground. What was going on? They had rescued this fellow with great difficulty, but this fellow wanted to go back and die. He was not respecting the fruits of everyone's labor. Don't stop me! At this moment, Evildoers Run Wild was also furious. He did not listen to anyone who tried to stop him. He swung his hands with all his might and shouted, "If I don't kill those bastards, I'll write my surname backwards." The strength of a grandmaster of combat like Evildoers Run Wild was still very terrifying. Even Wang Yu and Old Wang were no match for him in terms of strength. The two top-notch experts were shaken back and forth by Evildoers Run Wild, causing everyone in Chuanjin to be dumbfounded. Don't stop him. Let him die. If he dies, I won't have to think of a way for him. Just as Evildoers Run Wild could not restrain his anger, a familiar and cold voice suddenly traveled into the ears of Wang Yu and the other two from behind. When he heard this voice, Evildoers Run Wild was instantly dumbfounded. Then, he and Wang Yu turned their heads at the same time and saw Wuji looking at them with a look of disdain. When he saw that the person who had spoken was Wuji, Wang Yu hesitated for a moment and casually let go of Evildoers Run Wild. Old Wang also let go of his hand. Meanwhile, Evildoers Run Wild quietened down and asked in disbelief, "Boss Wuji, what did you just say? You have a way?" "That's right," Wuji said indifferently. "As long as you don't die right now, there's still a chance to turn this around. If you go and die now, then you'll just have to wait for someone else to take over your territory." What do you mean by that?" Evildoers Run Wild was dumbfounded. Humph. Wuji sneered. "Why do you think Sovereign Descent rebelled against you? To move unhindered mines. Now that the mines have been robbed, Sovereign Descent must be even more anxious than you are. After all, if you lose, you'll only lose your guild. If the mines are robbed, not only will he lose his guild, but he'll also have an enemy like you." Hearing this, Evildoers Run Wild couldn't help but be stunned. Wasn't that right? Whether it was in the game or in real life, traitors were the most annoying people. Sovereign Descent risked being hunted down by Evildoers Run Wild and being criticized by everyone in the world for their rebellion, but in the end, they came up empty-handed. What was their goal? At this moment, Sovereign Descent was much more anxious than Evildoers Run Wild. What's the point of him being anxious? Don't tell me he can still take back the mines? Evildoers Run Wild asked after thinking for a moment. Oh! Wuji didn't answer Evildoers Run Wild's question. Instead, he raised his eyebrows and said, "You should know what Sovereign Descent is capable of, right? Do you think he has the guts to rebel against you so easily?" Chapter 1633. Obviously, it's a done deal, Wuji said indifferently. Even though Evildoers Run Wild was weaker than Wang Yu, he was still an expert who could crush any normal player. To move unhindered, Sovereign Descent was a force to be reckoned with. It was obvious that he was one of Evildoers Run Wild's capable subordinates. Naturally, he had a good understanding of Evildoers Run Wild's capabilities. To move unhindered, Sovereign Descent's income was definitely not low. No matter how ambitious Sovereign Descent was, they still had to think twice before doing anything. To move unhindered, tens of thousands of underlings might be a terrifying force to other guilds, but they were minuscule in the face of a colossus like Sovereign Descent. No matter how you looked at it, the chances of Sovereign Descent succeeding in his rebellion were not high. Under these circumstances, who would offend a fearsome expert like Evildoers Run Wild for no reason? Not to mention, this expert had such a large group of underlings. Was it because money was easy to earn, or was it because life was not easy? In Unhindered, there were many powers stronger than Sovereign's Descent. However, everyone knew how high the success rate of going against a monster like Rampage was, and how severe the consequences would be if they failed. Sovereign Descent dared to take the lead. It was obvious that he had found a backing and a way out for himself. Otherwise, he wouldn't have taken the lead so easily. Damn it! This traitorous thing! Evildoers Run Wild couldn't help but curse after hearing Wuji's words. Hee. However, Wuji laughed and said, "Actually, it's not necessarily a bad thing for him to be a traitor." "Fuck. You can't be like this." Wang Yu's face darkened. "My brother's underling is already a traitor, and you're still making sarcastic remarks." "Yeah. Wuji, that old dog, always likes to gloat." "How despicable." The other people in Chuanjin also curled their lips and expressed their disdain for Wuji's behavior. Only the evildoer, Heng Xing, seemed to be deep in thought as he asked, "Brother Wuji, did you notice something?" "Not bad." Wuji nodded with satisfaction and said, "After all, you used to be a big boss. Your vision is better than this group of country bumpkins." F***ck your grandpa. Who are you calling a country bumpkin? When the people of the Chuanjin sect heard this, they couldn't help but become restless. They had the intention of pressing Wuji old dog to the ground and giving him a good beating. Wuji shrugged, spread his hands and said with a smile, "Look, I didn't even say who the country bumpkin was, and the country bumpkin took it to heart." Fuck. Everyone was speechless, and they resisted the urge to beat this brat up. After the disturbance from Chuanjin, Evildoer's Run Wild's originally gloomy mood improved a lot, and he also calmed down. He moved closer to Wuji and asked, "Brother Wuji, what did you see?" Hee. Wuji said with a smile, "A piece of trash like Sovereign Descends isn't very useful. Now that this mess is out of his control, his boss behind the scenes will definitely come out and clean up his mess." Makes sense. After hearing Wuji's explanation, Evildoer's Run Wild touched his chin thoughtfully. Indeed, to move unhindered, Sovereign Descends and Evildoer's Run Wild's internal relations instantly fell apart. To move unhindered now was like a plate of loose sand. If they wanted to control the situation, they needed someone who could gather the loose sand together. To move unhindered was obvious. Apart from Evildoer's Run Wild, the other powers in the guild refused to submit to anyone, let alone a traitor like Sovereign Descends. Therefore, the only player who could control the situation was Evildoer's Run Wild. The boss of Sovereign Descends obviously didn't put in so much effort just to hurt others. Now that the mine had been robbed, there was no way he would let it go so easily. What should we do now? Evildoer's Run Wild thought for a moment before asking, "Do you want me to show my face on the forums and tell everyone that Sovereign Descends doesn't have the ability to defeat me?" It wasn't hard to see that Evildoer's Run Wild was a smart person. He knew what to do in this situation. No need. However, Wuji waved his index finger and said, "At a time like this, whoever takes the lead first will be the one to take the cake. Our enemy isn't the big guilds, but the power behind Sovereign Descends. All we need to do now is wait and see." As the saying went, the onlookers see the game more clearly than the players. Wuji had a much clearer view of the current situation than Evildoer's Run Wild. Rampage was different from the boss behind Monarch Descends the World. The boss behind Monarch Descends the World wanted to take over the mines with the least amount of effort, whereas Unhindered the World wanted to take back the mines that originally belonged to them. To move unhindered was a force to be reckoned with. After putting in so much effort, they naturally wouldn't just hand over the mine in their hands obediently. To move unhindered by Evildoer's Run Wild taking the initiative to challenge these big guilds might incite public anger and draw even more hatred for themselves. To move unhindered was like a hungry tiger falling prey to a pack of wolves. No matter how capable they were, they wouldn't be able to draw so much hatred. At that time, the boss behind Sovereign Descends would definitely take advantage of the situation. They might even be able to take the mine without paying a single cent and reshuffle the power balance of the guilds in Heroes Continent. After all, mining was like a rice bowl. Miners didn't care who their boss was. They only cared about who gave them their rice bowl. The Quanjin sect had dominated the gaming circle for a long time, so everyone knew what kind of temper Wuji had. This person would eat anything, but he would never suffer a loss. Naturally, he would not let a monster like Rampage do such an obvious loss. Wait and see? Is that possible? Evildoers Run Wild's originally clear mind started to become muddled again. "Don't worry and wait," Wuji said calmly. "We'll probably see the results soon." Fine. The more capable Wang Yu was, the more dirty Wuji was. Evildoers Run Wild understood this very well. Since Wuji had already said so, Evildoers Run Wild had no choice but to listen to Wuji's opinion. Meanwhile, after Sovereign Descends logged off with his underlings, he went straight to the local server forums. To move unhindered, the players on the forums were still discussing how to fight for territory with the big guilds. Without hesitation, the members of Sovereign Descends started spreading the news of Evildoers Run Wild's ruthlessness and success in quelling the rebellion. The strength of a Ghostwriter army of tens of thousands of players was quite terrifying. In less than a few minutes, the thread about Evildoers Run Wild taking care of Sovereign Descends quickly became the top of the forums and a new topic of discussion among the players. Holy shit! Amazing! How did Evildoers Run Wild flatten Sovereign Descends in this situation? Of course! Don't you know who Evildoers Run Wild is? How can he lead such a big guild if he doesn't have some skill? For a time, the players on the forums were in a different direction. Chapter 1634. To move unhindered, Evildoers Run Wild's turnaround was completely unexpected. After all, everyone knew exactly what kind of situation Evildoers Run Wild was in at the time. He was surrounded by tens of thousands of players like a dog, yet he was still able to turn things around. When the news first came out, everyone thought it was just a rumor. Fuck, didn't that mean that the sun had risen from the west? However, with tens of thousands of players saying the same thing, even if it was a rumor, there wouldn't be a wave without a wind. After confirming it over and over again, the bosses of the various guilds finally realized that it wasn't just a rumor. Not only did Evildoers Run Wild escape under the watchful eyes of everyone, even Monarch Descends and his subordinates had suddenly vanished from the face of the earth. The last time they logged into the game was when they surrounded Evildoers Run Wild, City of Sin. All of these signs pointed to the fact that not only had Monarch Descends and his subordinates been defeated by Evildoers Run Wild, they had suffered a crushing defeat. Everyone had been forced to log out of the game and not even dared to show their faces. Bloody hell, internal strife had always been a headache for all guild. After all, the larger a guild was, the more power the guild leader would have, and the harder it would be to manage the guild. With the Three Fiends Manor as a prime example, it was only natural that they had to be on guard. Even so, when internal strife occurred in a guild, it would take at least 3 to 5 days to resolve the mess. Some of the weaker guild leaders might not even be able to resolve the problem in a month. In fact, there were many guilds that had fallen apart due to internal strife. To move unhindered, less than 2 hours had passed since news of internal strife appeared on the forums to the post announcing Evildoers Run Wild's success in quelling the rebellion. Unhindered was a rebellion of tens of thousands of players. Just the number of players in the rebellion alone was already more than the total number of players in all the major guilds combined. Yet, the demon Rampage had managed to quell the rebellion of tens of thousands of players in such a short amount of time, and even kicked them out of the game. His actions were swift and his methods were unheard of. What was even more frightening was that Evildoers Run Wild subordinates were busy fighting over mines with other guilds. In other words, Evildoers Run Wild had dealt with tens of thousands of Monarch Descends players without anyone's help. Just thinking about it was terrifying. What a terrifying person he was. Of course, how terrifying was Evildoers Run Wild's strength. The most important thing was that Evildoers Run Wild had not fallen yet. To move unhindered meant that this behemoth would be able to rise again very soon. After unhindered the world pulled itself together, the ownership of the mines that had yet to be warmed up in everyone's hands was still uncertain. Everyone knew the temperament of Rampant the Evildoer, and the personality of Unhindered the World. They were all guild players, so it wasn't like they didn't know about it. How could Unhindered let them off so easily after stealing something from them? However, they definitely wouldn't be willing to give it up just like that. Putting aside the fact that they had spent a lot of effort to snatch the mines, even if they ignored that, all the major guilds were in the game. Who wouldn't care about their reputation? This was especially true for these major guilds. Everyone viewed their reputation as more important than anything else. If they obediently handed over the mines, it wouldn't be as simple as losing a single mine. What the f*ck, if they were so cowardly, why would they still play as a guild? Players in the game were the most realistic. No matter how good your benefits were, if your guild was labeled as a coward, it would definitely cause a serious loss of players. After all, to a player, you could say that they were poor, ugly, and single, but you definitely couldn't say that they were a coward. Players were the guild's labor force. Without players, how could a guild still be called a guild? To move unhindered, the mines that they had snatched over really became a hot potato. Throw it away. They couldn't bear to. If they didn't throw it away, it would be poisonous. Whoever wasn't afraid of death would eat it. At this moment, the ones who were the most devastated were the people from Blood Alliance. Damn, what was there to be afraid of? Who would have thought that Chuanjin would be able to save evildoers run wild in the end? Damn, is there anything that these bastards can't do? After repeatedly confirming the authenticity of the news, Blood Red War Flag sat down on a chair and repeated this sentence over and over again. If other guilds snatched it, then so be it. After all, the mines didn't belong to evildoers run wild. It was reasonable for those with bigger fists to snatch it. However, with the relationship between Blood Alliance and Chuanjin, Blood Red War Flag still snatched evildoers run wild's mines. This was a bit unkind. Wasn't this stabbing their friend in the back? For a moment, Blood Red War Flag's face turned red. They didn't know how to explain this to Wang Yu. I think this is a bit fishy. Just as Blood Red War Flag was at a loss, Blood Wind Whisper looked at the screenshots of the post a few times and came to a conclusion. Oh? What's fishy? To move unhindered after evildoers run wild left, people saw the rebel army disappear with their own eyes. How is this fishy? Blood Red War Flag was confused. I'm not sure. Blood Wind Whisper rubbed his chin and muttered, Anyway, I just feel that something is wrong. Since evildoers run wild left Chuanjin, then this kid must be with Boss Wuji. This kind of big talk isn't Wuji's style. I think you should find someone else to confirm it. I've already confirmed it dozens of times. Who else should I find? Blood Red War Flag asked unhappily. Of course it's Chuanjin. Blood Wind Whisper said, They're the ones involved, so of course they have the right to speak. Chuanjin? Blood Red War Flag was speechless. Do you think Wuji and Iron Ox will turn on us if they know we also snatch the mines? If it's Wuji, they probably won't. As for Iron Ox, Blood Wind Whisper rubbed his chin and thought. At most they'll kill you a few times. f*ck. Blood Red War Flag collapse. Then I won't ask any more. Aha, just kidding. Seeing this, Blood Wind Whisper laughed. At this time, if evildoers run wild really quelled the rebellion, then we'll just report the truth according to the original story. Okay. As Blood Red War Flag said this, he opened Wuji's friend list and sent a message. Boss Wuji, I heard that you rescued the monster boss? Heh! Wuji was a smart person. As soon as he saw the content of Blood Red War Flag's message, he guessed that Blood Red War Flag was here to inquire about the situation. So, he smiled and replied calmly, Yes, why? To move unhindered mines too? Chapter 1635. Blood Red War Flag's bullshit would not even work on a kid, let alone in front of Wuji. However, Wuji could guess Blood Red War Flag's intentions when they snatched the mine. Right now, Blood Red War Flag's words obviously meant that they wanted to respectfully hand over the mine. Of course, Wuji would not pursue the matter, so he casually replied, I see. Thank you for your help, War Flag. I'll treat you to a drink some other day. In the end, Wuji even added a funny emoticon, at the end of the message. Seeing Wuji's reply, Blood Red War Flag let out a long sigh of relief. The rock in their hearts was finally lifted. Obviously, Blood Red War Flag knew that Wuji had seen through their intentions. However, they were both smart people. If they did not say anything, they would still be good friends. Naturally, Wuji gave Blood Red War Flag a way out of this embarrassing situation. Don't say that. Seeing that the matter was over, Blood Red War Flag hurriedly said, Chuanjin and to move unhindered are brother guilds, and Blood Alliance is also brother guilds. Our guilds are also brother guilds. It's only right for brothers to help each other. Seeing Blood Red War Flag's reply, Wuji smiled. He then said to evildoers run wild, see, I told you that the mastermind behind the sovereign descends would not be able to hold back and clean up after the sovereign descends. You don't even need to do anything. Everyone knows that you've taken care of the sovereign descent. Really? Evildoers run wild had an expression of disbelief. He never would have thought that the mastermind behind the sovereign descends would act so quickly. Of course, Wuji said confidently, and this person will be exposed very soon. On the other side, Blood Red War Flag was just about to praise Blood Wind Whisper after successfully glossing over the matter of the mine when a friend request popped up. System notice. Absent Sun has sent you a friend request. As the leader of a big guild, being added as a friend was something that happened every day, so it was not strange for Blood Red War Flag. However, what was strange was that Absent Sun's note said, Guild Leader Bloodred, I have a deal that will benefit you. Would you like to take it? Business? Seeing Absent Sun's remark, Blood Red War Flag was slightly taken aback. Blood Red War Flag was also a guild leader. Although his IQ was lower than Wuji's, he was still slightly higher than the average person. What business could the Blood Alliance have in their hands? Could it be that they were talking about the mining area that they had just snatched from Unhindered the World? To move unhindered, Wang Yu, evildoers run wild, and Blood Red War Flag didn't dare to offend anyone. Now that he had decided to return the mine, he definitely wouldn't think about selling it. Blood Red War Flag was just about to reject him, but then they thought about it. Just as they felt that the mine was a problem, someone else immediately came to discuss a deal. This was too much of a coincidence. To move unhindered, could it be that this guy was the one going against them? Thinking of this, Blood Red War Flag immediately agreed and accepted Absent Sun's application. At the same time, Absent Sun sent a message. Are you the leader of Blood Red War Flag? Yes. There were no duplicate names in the game. Don't you know Chinese? Blood Red War Flag asked angrily. Sorry. This is my first time here. Please forgive me for not going out to greet you. Absent Sun quickly sent another inexplicable message. What kind of nonsense is this? If you don't know how to use idioms, then don't randomly use them, okay? Blood Red War Flag was speechless. Look at your wording. Are you a primary school student? What business do you have with me? Do you want me to hire you with a high salary? It wasn't that Blood Red War Flag had never experienced this before. There had been more than one primary school student who pretended to be a god and privately messaged Blood Red War Flag, asking them to hire them with a high salary. The first time they encountered this, Blood Red War Flag was almost fooled. No. Absent Sun decisively denied. I really have a business to do with Leader Blood. Is that so? Blood Red War Flag thought for a moment. Then just say it. I don't like to beat around the bush. Leader Blood is such a cheerful person. What you want to say is cheerful. Blood Red War Flag was speechless again. You can say that. Absent Sun casually covered up his slip of the tongue and then asked, Does Leader Blood have a mine? As expected. Seeing Absent Sun's message, Blood Red War Flag's eyes tightened. He calmly replied, That's right. May I ask what business you have with me? Absent Sun was also a straightforward person. He directly said, We, the Dark Alliance, intend to buy it. I don't know if Leader Blood is willing to sell it. Dark Alliance? Is there such a guild? Blood Red War Flag was a little confused when they heard the guild that Absent Sun mentioned. As the leader of a large guild like the Blood Alliance, Blood Red War Flag was very familiar with the first-rate guilds in the country. They had never heard of such a vulgar and ugly name as the Dark Alliance. Yes, it was just formed yesterday, Absent Sun said. This doesn't conflict with our business, right? Business? Ha! Blood Red War Flag laughed. I wonder how sincere you are? We are very sincere, Absent Sun directly replied. Blood Red War Flag was a little confused. Why did this Absent Sun look like he did not understand human language? When the word sincere was mentioned when discussing business, even an idiot would know that it was about the price. Yet, this guy actually replied with such a sentence. Wasn't this guy just messing around when discussing business? Then can you show it a little? Blood Red War Flag asked, suppressing his depression. Sincerity? How should I show it? Absent Sun asked in a silly manner. Damn, are you really stupid or just pretending? Blood Red War Flag said helplessly. Tell me your price. So, sincerity is the price, Absent Sun said with a sudden realization. 500,000 gold coins. F*CKU. Seeing Absent Sun's bid, Blood Red War Flag could not help but spit out a mouthful of profanity. Damn it, this was a mine, not one or two pieces of equipment. A mere 500,000 gold coins was like buying a mine. Even beggars did not have to pay so little. Since he dared to offer such a price, it could be seen that this guy called Absent Sun was not a fool. He was just making fun of himself. Blood Red War Flag would not be polite to such a person. However, Absent Sun was not angry at all. Instead, he said calmly, this price is already very high. I think Blood Red War Flag has no reason to refuse. Why? Blood Red War Flag asked unhappily. This was such a large mine. People would fight to sell it for 5 million gold coins. Who gave him the confidence to be so arrogant when he offered 500,000? Chapter 1636. Oh! Blood Red War Flag was surprised to hear this. They didn't expect Absent Sun to come prepared. Indeed, everyone knew that evildoers run wild was still alive and kicking. To move unhindered was only a matter of time. When that time came, wouldn't they be punished one by one? Although the guilds fighting for the mines were all large guilds with a relatively large number of players, at the end of the day, these players did not belong to a single guild. They were not a group either. Normally, they would be lucky if they did not wish for each other's deaths. At a time like this, it was complete nonsense for them to ally together and resist unhindered. In most cases, as long as the matter didn't happen to them, they wouldn't care. To move unhindered now, if they really came back to fight for territory, no one would be able to stop them. As for the mines that had been robbed, of course, no one really dared to develop them. Even if they held on to them, it would be a disaster. It was just like how if Overlord Chu hadn't died, Liu Bang wouldn't have dared to become the emperor. If it weren't for the fact that the big guilds had spent a lot of effort fighting for territory, someone would have returned the mines. Well, for example, didn't Blood Red War Flag already plan to do so? Ha ha! Blood Red War Flag thought for a moment and laughed. You guys are here to rob a burning house. Boss, you're wrong. Towards Blood Red War Flag's words, Absent Sun flatly denied. How can this be called looting a burning house? This is a market demand. Strictly speaking, your guild is only helping us with some work. 500,000 gold is not a small amount. It had to be said that although Absent Sun's words were a bit problematic, his mind was still clear. Blood Red War Flag couldn't refute him. Thinking about it carefully, it was true. The big guilds didn't dare to use the mines themselves. It wasn't like they were working for the guilds that dared to use them. In this case, 500,000 gold coins wasn't a low employment fee. However, there was a difference between being forced to work and taking the initiative to work. It was business, after all. Who didn't want to work for them? The former was a form of forced buying and selling. Whether it was in the game or in real life, being forced to do certain things would always make people unhappy. Even if it was for their own good, it was inevitable that they would be unwilling. But so what? To move unhindered. Revenge was what everyone should be worried about now, and not the Dark Alliance that was taking advantage of the situation. To move unhindered and beat them up so they could snatch back the mine and make a fool of themselves, or to collect money and sell the mine at a low price. It was a very easy choice to make. Even if everyone was very unwilling, they could only suffer in silence. Blood Red War Flag was also a guild leader. Hearing Absent Sun's words, Blood Red War Flag's reaction was the same as the other guild leaders. They were quite displeased. However, Blood Red War Flag didn't retort or refuse the trade on the spot. Instead, it calmly said, "You're right. However, your actions have made me very unhappy. So, I plan to reconsider whether to sell it to you or not." Absent Sun was also very understanding and said, "I understand how you're feeling right now, Bloody Red Boss. You can go ahead and think about it. However, time is limited, so don't even think about raising the price. Furthermore, the mining area in your hands might not be worth a single cent. Since our Dark Alliance dares to take over these mining areas, we have the right to negotiate with you." Alright. Using bluff and intimidation was a common tactic used by large guilds when negotiating with smaller guilds. Blood Red War Flag had been in the game for a long time, but this was the first time someone had played this trick. The meaning behind Absent Sun's words was very clear. To move unhindered, there was an 80% chance that the mining area would be snatched back. The meaning behind his words was extremely arrogant. He was indirectly telling Blood Red War Flag that if the Dark Alliance had the ability to go against them, they naturally had the ability to snatch the mining area with their own hands. To move unhindered was to talk terms with Blood Red War Flag, so they naturally had the ability to snatch the mining area with their own hands. Then let's just take it one step at a time. Blood Red War Flag casually replied with a dark expression, then closed the conversation window. They pulled out Wuji again and anxiously shouted, "Boss Wuji, there's a situation." Even though the Blood Red War Flag was not a good person, they were still rather loyal. Not to mention the fact that Absent Sun's unyielding attitude and forceful selling made the Blood Red War Flag unhappy. Even if Absent Sun had licked the Blood Red War Flag's ass, the Blood Red War Flag would not have thought of selling the mine to the Dark Alliance. After all, Blood Red War Flag and Chuanjin had already discussed the matter of the mining area, and this Dark Alliance was obviously the one who had stabbed them in the back. To move unhindered, Wuji was magnanimous and did not mind the Blood Red War Flag's actions of snatching the mining area. Logically speaking, Blood Red War Flag would not take the initiative to stand against the people of Chuanjin. The fish has taken the bait. Receiving Blood Red War Flag's message, Wuji raised his eyebrows slightly and muttered to the crowd. He then replied, "Is someone looking for you to buy the mining area?" Seeing Wuji's message, Blood Red War Flag had a look of shock on his face. "You? How did you know?" Wuji said calmly, "I guessed. Someone spread the news, and naturally, someone would take advantage of the situation." "Awesome. Awesome." Hearing this, Blood Red War Flag sent a heartfelt thumbs-up emoji. At the same time, they felt a chill down their spine. Damn it, it was said that it was easy to talk to smart people. However, it was not easy to talk to a smart person like Wuji. It was terrifying, it felt as if they were talking to someone who could read mind. Their entire body was being seen clearly, and they would feel uncomfortable if there were any differences in punctuation. Just as Blood Red War Flag was thinking about it, Wuji sent another message. He asked, "Then who is this guild that dares to take advantage of the situation in front of so many big guilds?" "Dark Alliance." Blood Red War Flag replied without hesitation. "Dark Alliance? Seeing this extremely unfamiliar guild name, Wuji could not help but frown. In Wuji's mind, a guild that dared to initiate a civil war in the reigning over the world, and even dared to take advantage of the situation at this time, had to be a top-tier guild. Its scale and reputation would not be any lower than the Blood Alliance. However, Wuji had never heard of the Dark Alliance before. As the saying goes, know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never be defeated. No matter how cunning Wuji was, he had to understand the other party's general information before he could come up with a plan. However, for this enemy, other than the vulgar name, Wuji basically knew nothing about them. He had never even heard of them before. This kind of opponent was a little hard to deal with. Hey! Wuji looked around and asked everyone, have any of you heard of the Dark Alliance? Dark Alliance? Chapter 1637. Even famous sword Daoxue, who had always been well informed, had no impression of the guild mentioned by Wuji. This time Wuji was even more puzzled. To move unhindered was a big guild. Even a novice player in the game would have heard of it. To move unhindered and stab others in the back, to move unhindered minds at this time, it had to be at least a top guild. However, this guild was unknown, which was really strange. Could it be that there was some kind of force behind this guild? Of course, it would be nonsense to say that it was a top family or a military force. This was documentary literature, so there was definitely no such nonsense. Most of the conflicts in the game were between guilds. The cause of the conflict was also very simple: stealing monsters, land, and equipment. If it got out of hand, it would at most escalate to a conflict between studios. As for the so-called big families and forces, it was completely wishful thinking. What was a big family and force? If they had so much free time, wouldn't it be more direct for them to directly find trouble with Longting Company? How would they have the mood to come to the game to compete with a group of small studios for benefits? Wouldn't that be degrading themselves? Not to mention those big families and forces, even the sponsors behind the major professional teams would not be so low as to compete with studios for business. Therefore, no matter how big the force behind Dark Alliance was, at best, it was a big studio. Chuanjin had also come into contact with studios, among which Wuji had a better impression of Xiaobing's studio. However, although Xiaobing's studio was also very large, and after Xiaobing's studio was taken over by evildoers run wild, Xiaobing's studio had taken over most of their channels. To move unhindered was like hitting a rock with an egg. Otherwise, they would not have lost so badly in the beginning. Moreover, it was said that after Xiaobing's studio was kicked out of Rebirth, they had already shifted their business to other games. They had no time to spare, so it was unlikely that they would suddenly appear and go against reigning the world. To move unhindered, Wuji really couldn't think of any other studio that had the ability or motive to provoke them. Just as Wuji was thinking hard about the background of the Dark Alliance, Wang Yu rubbed his chin and said, "Could it be some studio or something? Aren't these bastards very low profile?" Profit was the only thing that workshops pursued. As the biggest beneficiary of the game, it was only natural that reigning the world would be targeted. Both Mu Zixian and Wang Yu had been cheated by the studio. Wang Yu had never had a good impression of this kind of group, so when talking about the studio, Wang Yu had some emotions. "Don't be silly." Hearing Wang Yu's words, Mingjian Daoxue couldn't help but mock. "One look and I can tell that you're an outsider. From what I know, other than Old Demon, the studios in our country are all small fries. To move unhindered, the established studios know that they won't be able to make much money, so they've long changed games. To move unhindered is just a motley crew. Tisk." Although Wang Yu knew that he couldn't compare to Mingjian Daoxue in this aspect, out of his pride as a Chuanjin contrarian, Wang Yu still curled his lips and retorted, "What do you know? Are there only Chinese studios in this game?" Hearing Wang Yu's words, Mingjian Daoxue was speechless. Studios are also saturated. Those overseas studios can't even finish making money in their own territory, So why would they come all the way to our country's server to pick a fight? I'll lose if I argue with an outsider like you. That's hard to say. If they can't make money, they'll come here to earn some extra income. Wang Yu continued to be stubborn. Huh. As the saying goes, the speaker didn't mean it, but the listener did. Wang Yu was indeed an outsider. Although what he said was reasonable, it was all layman's words. When others heard what Wang Yu said, they would at most think that he was a noob. However, when Wu Ji heard Wang Yu and Mingjian Daoxue, he seemed to have thought of something and asked Mingjian Daoxue, to move unhindered, are there any overseas studios that are similar in scale? Damn. Wu Ji, you're not a noob. Don't tell me you took old cow's word seriously. Mingjian Daoxue was shocked by Wu Ji's question. It was just as Mingjian Daoxue had said, the competition between studios was not that great. They were all in charge of their own territories, and they could not even earn enough money from their own territories. Who would spend so much effort to look for work in other places? Time was money. If they had the time, they might as well sell more things. Cut the crap. Just tell me if there are any. Wu Ji waved his hand and interrupted Mingjian Daoxue, then asked seriously. Well, Mingjian Daoxue thought for a moment and said, there aren't any that are as big as Old Demon, but there are some that are slightly worse. Tell me, what are the names of these studios? Wu Ji asked. There aren't many studios of this scale. Mingjian Daoxue said, I only know of 3. One is the European servers, Royal Honor, the other is the American servers, Freemasonry, and the last is the Japanese servers, Black Dragon Society. But this Black Dragon Society isn't really a studio right now, at most a larger guild. Yes. It's him. Before Mingjian Daoxue could finish speaking, Wu Ji suddenly interrupted. This Black Dragon Society should be the so-called Dark Alliance. Black Dragon Society? Everyone was stunned when they heard that. How can you be so sure? There were countless studios in the world. Furthermore, this matter might not be the work of a studio. The fact that Wu Ji was so certain of pushing the blame to the Black Dragon Society was really confusing. Ha ha. Wu Ji laughed and said, it's so obvious, can't you guys tell? It had to be said that Wu Ji didn't differentiate between friend and foe when he mocked. This bastard's face was filled with disdain for everyone's intelligence. Look at your sister, how is it obvious? Facing the pretentious Wu Ji, everyone gave him the middle finger. It was obvious that not only did their reaction not scare Wu Ji, but it was also what he wanted. This guy liked to see people like this. Only when he saw Wang Yu roll up his sleeves did Wu Ji retract his annoying smile and say, actually, there are 3 reasons. Which 3? Wang Yu tilted his ear and asked. 1. The Black Dragon Society is not small. Wu Ji said. Nonsense. The Black Dragon Society isn't the only guild of this scale. Mingdu shouted. You shut up. Wu Ji glared at Mingdu and said, 2. To move unhindered and develop a mine that the Black Dragon Society can't develop, from a certain point of view, the Black Dragon Society has a motive. This. Evildoers Run Wild was a little embarrassed. According to what you said, there are countless guilds with motives. Chapter 1638. Oh? What's the third point? Hearing Wu Ji's words, old Wang, who was not interested in Wu Ji keeping them in suspense, could not help but be curious. Resources, Wu Ji said calmly. Resources? What do you mean? Not only old Wang, but the rest of Chuanjin were also confused. What the F***ck was this? They were not even close to each other. Hee. Wu Ji laughed and said, don't forget, not every server is as vast as the country server. This, everyone was stunned again. Indeed, the map in Rebirth roughly corresponded to the world map. China was a country with vast territory and abundant resources. It had 300 main cities in the game, while the servers of those smaller countries only had a few main cities. The Korean server was slightly better. Although their territory was small, they had few players. However, it was different for Japan. Although their territory was not much bigger than the Korean server, their player base was much higher. Especially after Rebirth's global data was combined, after the Japanese server and the national server were connected, the Japanese server's players suddenly started pouring in. The Japanese server, which originally had a few 100,000 players, now had millions of players. In addition, the original 3 islands and 6 cities were taken by Chuanjin and the Blood Alliance. On average, the other main cities had almost 1 million players each. Such a player density could only be described as terrifying. One had to know that even the largest main city in the national server, Holy Light City, only had 1 million players. Main cities like Yuhuiqing only had 400,000 to 500,000 players. Those normal main cities actually only had around 300,000 players. 300,000 people did not sound like a lot, but 300,000 people entering the city at the same time could fill up a main city like Yuhuiqing's. Even walking would be a problem. As for over 1 million people squeezing into an island, the conditions were harsh and the lack of resources was imaginable. If the local players found it too crowded, they could go to the wilderness. Would the Japanese players have to soak in the sea? The Black Dragon Guild controls the 4 main cities of Ingzhou Island. Isn't the allocation of resources up to them? Mingjian Daoxue curled his lips and questioned. It's true that the Black Dragon Society has the final say, but they have to have it too. Wuji smiled and said, to move unhindered, don't forget that the largest mining area in the Japanese server is in their hands. What other resources could they possibly have? This, with Wuji's words, everyone finally understood what was going on. They were all veterans in the game, so they knew a lot about the game. Ordinary players played games to kill time, but the majority of players who played guilds did so to earn money. The larger a guild was, the more impure its motives would be. As for the players who had been tricked into joining the guild, they could either become one of their own and make a fortune together, or they could become the guild's free laborers. Every month, the guild would give them some rewards to make them happy. The Black Dragon Society had hundreds of thousands of players, and their influence spread across the 4 main cities of the Japanese server. If someone said that such a guild was here to play games to pass the time, even they would not believe it. It was obvious that such a guild was here to make money. Nowadays, there were more and more players in the Japanese server, and their consumption of resources was increasing. Other than in dungeons, there was no spacious space in the mountains. It was difficult to fight monsters, so naturally, the supply of resources could not meet the demand. To move unhindered, the largest resource production area in the Japanese server had been occupied. Not only did the Black Dragon Society not get any leftovers, they didn't even have enough for themselves. The Black Dragon Society was still hoping to make a fortune from the resources, but now they had to lose money. To move unhindered territory for the sake of profit. As for the big guilds and other servers, they did not have enough resources to mine, so of course they would not come all the way to the local server to cause trouble. To move unhindered among all the guilds in the game that had the conditions and the ability to do so, the Black Dragon Society was the only guild that met all the conditions. It was no wonder that Wuji was so determined to be the Black Dragon Society's doing after hearing the name of the Black Dragon Society. And this dark alliance was most likely established by Black Dragon Society players. F***ck these bastards. Why are there no movements from hundreds of thousands of players coming to the local server? Thinking of this, Mingjian Daoxue could not help but feel a chill in his heart. Who told you that they have hundreds of thousands of players coming? Wuji raised his eyebrows. Nonsense. Otherwise, would they dare to stab me in the back? Mingjian Daoxue said confidently. Tisk. Wuji heard this and said disdainfully, You call yourself a businessman. It seems like you lack a certain understanding of studio players. Being looked down upon by Wuji, Mingjian Daoxue's mind was instantly filled with question marks. He said unhappily, What opinion? At this moment, Evildoers Run Wild explained from the side. Studio players only have money and benefits in their eyes. They don't care who is the boss, they only care about who can give them food. What do you mean? Ming Jian Daoxue could not react for a moment. It means that whoever has the mines will have millions of followers. Evildoers Run Wild said. See that? This is the real boss. Little Snow, you're still lacking. Learn from your wife. Wuji once again mocked Ming Jian Daoxue mercilessly. Why else would someone like him take the initiative to say that he was sponsored by someone else? It was because he wanted to take care of Evildoers Run Wild's face. As he said this, Evildoers Run Wild extended his wings and was about to take off. At this moment, Wuji reached out to grab Evildoers Run Wild and asked, "You're just going to go like this? Do you know where they are? We can check. To move unhindered, we have a few brothers who have maxed out clairvoyance." Evildoers Run Wild said. "Don't talk nonsense." Wuji laughed coldly. "Do you believe that you can't order any of your brothers around?" Evildoers Run Wild was speechless when he heard this. That was true. The Dark Alliance was buying up mines, and the other guilds weren't as close to Chuanjin as the Blood Alliance. Although they weren't willing, they naturally wouldn't hesitate to sell this hot potato. To move unhindered was better than being targeted. However, no one knew what the people from reigning the world were thinking. Seeing the Dark Alliance pocketing the mines one by one, the players from reigning the world also realized that it was time for a change of boss. At this time, other than those trusted subordinates of the evildoer Rampant, no one else would stand together with the evildoer Rampant. They didn't even know who the boss was yet they had already closed their eyes and interfered. Did they still want their jobs? "You have to be calm at all times," Wuji said calmly. "Without the mines in your hands, who would listen to you? Are you going to spend money to buy back what belongs to you?" The words that Evildoers Run Wild was about to say were once again stuffed back into his throat by Wuji. The mines were now in the hands of the big guilds. To move unhindered territory, but the territory in the game belonged to the one with the biggest fist. The leaders of the big guilds were all shrewd. They definitely wouldn't return the land that they had spent so much effort to snatch for no reason. Therefore, if Evildoers Run Wild wanted to go against the Dark Alliance, the only way was to buy the mines like the Dark Alliance. But Wuji's words immediately dispelled Evildoers Run Wild's thoughts. In Evildoers Run Wild's heart, the mines were originally his. It was just that they were snatched away. Spending money to buy back what belonged to him wasn't appropriate no matter how he thought about it. Then what should we do? Evildoers Run Wild thought for a moment and asked Wuji. "To move unhindered mines and our brothers are taken away by others, right?" "Ha!" Wuji laughed out loud and said, "Taken away by others? There's no such thing. The Dark Alliance is only paying for their actions. I will make them spit out all the mines." "Really?" Hearing that they could take back all the mines without spending money, Evildoers Run Wild's eyes lit up. "Then what should we do now?" "Let the bullets fly for a while," Wuji said confidently. "There's no hurry to wait for them to take over all the mines. Once they take over all the mines, they will have a lot of power." Evildoers Run Wild was a little surprised when he heard that. "We might not be able to take care of them by then." "Don't worry," Wuji said calmly. "There will always be a way out. Someone will come and help us when the time comes." Alright. Although Evildoers Run Wild was feeling very uncertain, he knew Wuji's abilities. Now that Wuji had said so, he must have his plans. Evildoers Run Wild hesitated for a moment, but finally decided to listen to Wuji. After all, if Wuji could not do it with his intelligence, he would definitely not be able to do it either. Just as Wuji had expected, the Dark Alliance was actually the Black Dragon faction, and the mastermind was the boss of the Black Dragon faction, the Black Dragon King. Thinking about it, it made sense. To be able to bring a few hundred people across the sea to cause trouble in the country, and to use such underhanded methods to trick the largest guild in the country. To move unhindered, an average person would not have the guts and brains to do so. Just as the people of Quanzhen were guessing who their opponent was, the players of the Dark Alliance had already started their acquisition work. The reason why only a few hundred people from the Black Dragon faction had come was not only because they were afraid of publicity, but also because there were only a few hundred people in the Black Dragon faction who understood Chinese and could communicate normally. Chapter 1640. In just a few hours, the players of the Dark Alliance had negotiated the purchase of most of the mines and started to recruit miners. The skill of mining ores had been a very profitable path since the beginning of online games. Anyone who had played games before would know the logic of mining ores to get rich. Even a noob like Wang Yu knew the importance of ores to players. Otherwise, Evildoers Run Wild would not have been able to develop his guild into a large organization with millions of players in less than a year. However, in a game like Rebirth, all the mining areas had been firmly occupied by reigning the world ever since the game's launch. It would be difficult for anyone who was not a reigning the world player to mine. Because of this, most players had a strong desire to mine. The Huaxia service area had a lot of people. With a population of over 100 million players, it was hard to find a toad with 3 legs, but it was easy to find a miner with 2 legs. Just as the internal strife within reigning the world was spreading like wildfire, a Dark Alliance suddenly popped up to recruit miners. Any player with a brain would know what was going on. To move unhindered was about to become a thing of the past. The major powers in the game were about to be reshuffled, and the strongest would naturally be the Dark Alliance who had the rights to the mines in the game. As such, it was not just the players who wanted to earn money from mining, even the players from the major guilds could not help but develop a sense of opportunism. After all, the moral restraints of the real world did not have much of an effect on the game world. It was common for a bird to choose a tree to nest in. It was not strange for players to follow whichever guild was bigger. But what was strange was that the most enthusiastic players were actually the players who had to move unhindered. These guys were all very cunning. When the sovereign descends on the world betrayed them, this bunch of bastards had been watching from the side. Now that they heard that the mines in Evildoers Run Wild's hands had all been taken by the Dark Alliance, they naturally knew what to do. Actually, it made sense. Evildoers Run Wild had also said that the brothers under him were just trying to make ends meet. Their motive for playing the game was to earn money. Their feelings for the guild were far less than their true interests. What were feelings? Could they make ends meet? Work was the most important thing. Families would starve if they talked about feelings, so there was no need to force others to be absolutely loyal. Since they could not earn money by following Evildoers Run Wild, they naturally had to find another place to earn money. There were many players trying their best to join the Dark Alliance. If they hesitated, they would lose their jobs. Just as the Dark Alliance announced that they were recruiting miners, the system notifications rang in Evildoers Run Wild's ears. Player XXX has quit. To move unhindered from XXX City, XXX Guild has left the Dark Alliance. To move unhindered, Evildoers Run Wild was usually an optimistic person, and his mental fortitude was not weak. But looking at the string of news, Evildoers Run Wild's face was ashen, his eyes like a pool of stagnant water. It was not hard to see how much of a blow this matter had dealt to Evildoers Run Wild. No one in Xuanzhen mocked Evildoers Run Wild's pathetic state. Instead, they expressed extreme sympathy for Evildoers Run Wild. When he woke up in the morning, he was still the boss of over 1 million players. But in less than a day, he had lost everything. He had become a general without an army. He had experienced such a huge rise and fall in a single day. If it was someone with a weaker mental fortitude, they would probably want to die from such a blow. To move unhindered, most of these players left without saying goodbye. Those who were slightly more sensible might even know to say goodbye to evildoers run wild before they left. Evildoers run wild was a person who cared about his reputation. No matter how devastated he was, he had to pretend that nothing had happened and bid farewell to his brothers who had said goodbye to him. Brother, take care. To move unhindered, there will always be a place for you, although that was the case. Who would want such a position? Due to the breach of contract, every player who left the guild would have to pay a penalty fee to evildoers run wild. But looking at the number of gold coins in his wallet, evildoers run wild could not bring himself to be happy at all. This was probably the most difficult time for evildoers run wild to collect money. The Dark Dragon King was also very intelligent. He understood the principle of the rise and fall of the other. Furthermore, the players of Reigning the World were all experienced miners, and were very familiar with the mining area. Therefore, the Dark Alliance made an exception for the veteran players of Reigning the World, and did not even have to pay a membership fee. From a certain point of view, Reigning the World could be said to have been swallowed by the Dark Alliance. Furthermore, it was swallowed in one gulp without any effort. The Dark Dragon King was indeed a cunning old fox. It was indeed terrifying. It was not an injustice for evildoers run wild to lose to the Dark Dragon King. Evildoers run wild was so young. It was already beyond the Dark Dragon King's expectations that he was not killed in the first round. Dark Moon City. In the office of the Dark Alliance's headquarters, the Dark Dragon King sat on a chair and listened to his subordinates report lazily. His expression was extremely calm, and no one could tell if he was happy or angry. To move unhindered miners have been arranged? After listening to his subordinates' report, the Dark Dragon King nodded and asked calmly. It has been arranged, the subordinate said respectfully. Not bad. The Dark Dragon King looked at his subordinate approvingly. He then asked, What about the mining area? The subordinate said, There are a few others who seem to be waiting for a price increase. They haven't come to an agreement yet. A price increase? They are overthinking. The Dark Dragon King said calmly, Tell everyone to continue negotiating. If they really can't come to an agreement, then forget it. We have quite a lot of manpower. We can just rob them. After all, they were the ones who robbed the mining area. Understood. The subordinate bowed deeply and said, I will pass the message down now. Are you there? In Yu Huiqing, Blood Red War Flag once again received news from Absent Sunday. Without waiting for Blood Red War Flag's response, Absent Sun directly said, Guild Leader Blood Red, have you thought about the mining area? There are still people who want to die. Blood Red War Flag coldly snorted after seeing the message, then replied, Is it that urgent? I haven't thought about it. Ha ha! Absent Sun said, Haven't thought about it? Guild Leader Blood Red is waiting for the price increase, right? Ha! Blood Red War Flag pretended to be embarrassed and laughed. You can even tell. Absent Sun coldly snorted, Aren't you Chinese all like this? A fixed price of 500,000. Are you selling? The price is not negotiable? Blood Red War Flag asked again. Negotiate? You are thinking too much. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.